All right, well, welcome back, everybody. My name's Scott Shermer. I'm from Illinois. You've heard from me today and yesterday. Yesterday, we did a little bit of talking about quote unquote SLF non-infested states, and I'll make a quick joke here that Chris Logan, New York, it kind of always gives me a hard time about that. Maybe we should have titled that SLF non-known infested states. But today we're going to take a little, or this afternoon we're going to take a little bit of time to talk to some of those states that are known infested, confirmed to one degree or another. But first, we're going to start off with a quick schedule or agenda shift, and we're going to be bumping up Matt Travis to start off the afternoon with USDA. So we heard from him a little earlier on in the panel conversation, but Matt is the USDA PPQ National Policy Manager for Spotted Lanternfly, and he's going to cover a large national initiative that that many of us have been working on. So go ahead, Matt, take it away.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining. Hopefully, I appreciate the shift in schedule and change, and hopefully you'll find this next topic interesting from a strategic standpoint. So let's just look real quickly at the population growth and expansion of spotted lanternfly. So as many of you know, of course, spotted lanternfly has continued to expand, and in this past year, we found it, of course, in Michigan, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. It's expanded, of course, in Indiana, and as well as in Ohio. And as it continues to expand, we really were starting to look at this on a national level, a strategic level, and looking at how we can best influence the future and the direction of this program going forward. And so just again, take a snapshot quickly. In 2022, we had North Carolina, Michigan, Rhode Island, all with new spotted lanternfly population detections. And operationally, we still are looking very closely at long-range dispersal, rail, highways, airports, maritime ports, and distribution warehouses, and the way that spotted lanternfly makes its way along these transportation routes. Again, looking at the 23 program, we're looking at things such as the environmental assessment, the supplemental environmental assessment, which is PPQ's responsibility to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act and the Endangered Species Act. And we needed to include Indiana, Michigan, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts in our future planning, as well as the rest of the country, which we've done with the programmatic environmental assessment, which will soon be coming out as well, and looking forward to the states and anticipation of possible expansion into those states and how we can best support those states in their response and treatment operations once spotted lanternfly is detected. We are working on a strategic plan, which I'll really go into in detail here in a couple of minutes. Again, operationally, we're really focused on our rail, highway, airports, maritime ports, and distribution warehouses, and those key transportation pathways. This past year, we've been working on our treatment evaluation protocol for golden oil. We continue our treatment evaluation for broadcast treatments in established populations, egg mass monitoring and evaluation protocol, and in looking to expand some Bavaria Bassiana trials in our second year for non-pyrethroid treatments, and then also looking to the future towards verticillium wilt, verticillium non-alfalfa, and its uses against the tree of heaven, the preferred host. So for 23, our program goals have not significantly changed from 22. And these are really the 6 program goals that we are focused on for the program for this year. But let's just take a second and step back and look at the challenges that we've been facing with spotted lanternfly and, of course, the program. And I've heard a lot of great points, and certainly a lot of people have made these points, have highlighted these things and aspects of their research and discussions in the chat about some of the challenges that we face with spotted lanternfly. And certainly this list that I have here on this slide is not all inclusive. It's certainly, there are probably a lot more that we could add here. But basically we're looking at, an insect that's expanded from 1 to 14 states in relatively short amount of time, 8 to 9 years. At the same time, federal and state funding at a programmatic level hasn't really kept to pace with the expansion of the spotted lanternfly and in enabling states to be able to respond quickly to spotted lanternfly detection in established populations has been a challenge. We continue to be challenged with a lack of an effective lure or attractant. Certainly single generation of this insect, when we look at lab generations, rearing this insect in the lab for research and testing, single generation insects, tend to give us some challenges in building healthy colonies that we can really work around the year on. Certainly we know that spotted lanternfly has a wide, diverse host range. Quite a lot of hosts, certainly some preferred hosts, but certainly a large range of hosts and some hosts that we're not sure about yet, but certainly has been touched on again in the research and the testing, looking at new hosts and what it also could be using as hosts in some of the new areas that it may expand to. Again, multiple diverse pathways, a lot of ways that this has been assisted spread along transportation pathways, continues to move along those pathways, and certainly we've highlighted and touched on rail, certainly tractor trailer traffic and movement. Mark McLaughlin yesterday talked about some of the detections that they've had. So we're looking a lot of diverse pathways in areas that we're not really accustomed to working in terms of some of the sites, industrial sites, and some of these sites just present some new challenges for us as agencies and regulatory agencies try and contend with this insect. Certainly regulatory authorities amongst the states, it differs. Different states have different authorities. Knowing what their authorities are, what they can do in terms of response has been a bit of a challenge. How they can respond, can they use the chemicals available? Things like that have all come up as challenges in responding to this insect. Again, National Environmental Policy Act and the Endangered Species Act regulations has certainly played a part in our response and being able to quickly respond to some of our new detections, and certainly have presented us with some challenges as we have seen in the last year or two, certainly. And then certainly finding and implementing some good, logical, reasonable biological controls. That's not just some of the parasitoids that we certainly have heard great research about, but also looking at some of the bioinsecticides, some of the bioherbicides like verticillium that could be used as a tool for states that don't have the opportunities to use some of the conventional insecticides and pyrethroids that are currently part of the program and part of the toolbox. And so this all leads me to the discussion about the Strategic Planning Working Group. And so this began with a discussion with the National Association of States Department of Agriculture, that's NASDA. And that discussion between NASDA and our APHIS administrator, Mr. Kevin Shea, during one of their conversations, they expressed a desire to look at this strategically and to be engaged in part of a development of a plan, national plan, that would cover a span of years strategically for all the states, for all the continental United States, looking to the future, not just the states that spotted lanternfly currently occur in, but certainly states that possibly could get spotted lanternfly in the next several years, and how we best plan and go forward and kind of drive a direction for the program. And so we put together a strategic planning working group, and this was made of APHIS representatives, NASDA representatives, again, NASDA being the National Association of States Department of Agriculture, and in the National Plant Board, and certainly representatives of the Plant Board, both from spotted lanternfly states as well as states that have yet to find spotted lanternfly in their state are included. So a wide range and representation of the entire continental United States, made up of both states with spotted lanternfly and without spotted lanternfly, and states without spotted lanternfly. The task and purpose of the group is to collaborate and to build a strategic plan and outline the future direction of the National Spotted Lanternfly Program, and certainly provide guidance on how to effectively focus APHIS's program funding in support of the plan's established goals. So we're looking at building this plan, again, a plan that's responsive for both spotted lanternfly states and non-spotted lanternfly states, and also helping to focus how APHIS directs its funding or how it supports the goals established in this plan. And so we kicked off, our first meeting was in August 2022, and we've been working now, and we will continue to work now into March and into April, certainly, but we've been meeting pretty regularly since our kickoff on August 11th. We've had about 15 meetings, probably a little more, a lot of side meetings in between, with a 2-day in-person meeting in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And we've been developing and working to develop a strategic goal. Initially, we started out with 3 subgroups, and we kind of whittled those down to 2 subgroups that were really aligned to the 3 major goal areas. And those goal areas are the operations and implementation, scientific research and support for that research, and then a national campaign in outreach and education. We developed about 1 to 5 supporting objectives per goal, and then developed specific tactics, detailed tactics and actions that helps carry out each goal, identifying roles and responsibilities both for APHIS and for our state partners. And so our strategic goal is this: over the next 5 years, federal and state partners will work to limit the advancement of spotted lanternfly as we further scientific research towards the development of tools and options for pest management. So this certainly provides options for focusing our federal funding. This gives us an opportunity to continue to work towards answering a lot of those great questions that I've heard over the last day or so that have come up with a lot of the research presentations, and really help us manage our expectations, our resources along these goal areas. It helps us focus management efforts on high-risk pathways, small satellite populations, and certainly agricultural areas of concern. It's providing guidance for new states, states without spotted lanternfly, as well as states just finding themselves with the population of spotted lanternfly. Certainly allows optimization for resources as long-term solutions are being developed, and then continues to provide for both research and outreach and education, all key components of the program now, and certainly program pieces that are important for the future of the program. And so for 2024, under the strategic goal, overall strategic goal, we have again 3 major goal areas. The first goal, effectively limiting the advancement of spotted lanternfly and efficiently responding to its introduction within federal and state authorities and resource availability. Goal 2, supporting continued scientific research towards practical management and risk mitigation. And Goal 3, establish a consistent national and state level outreach message and educational campaign for the public and industry at risk for dispersal of spotted lanternfly. So again, within these 3 goals, we wanted to be able to address spotted lanternfly states, certainly where it currently occurs. We want to be able to plan for and be ready for new detections of populations. We want to continue long-term scientific research that will lead to practical management and risk mitigation, and then certainly establish that long-range, consistent national and state-level messaging to help educate and provides outreach messaging for the public, a key partner, and certainly industry, also a key partner in our struggle against spotted lanternfly. And so looking at goal number 1 and effectively limiting the advancement of spotted lanternfly, we have 3 objectives supporting this goal. Objective 1 is utilizing existing risk assessment models and prioritization tools to identify the appropriate response. So again, as we heard today from Dr. Matt Helmus and others, we want to be able to use the existing risk models, the risk models that are being developed, that are currently in use, and that potentially could continue to be used to identify where we should be responding to, where we should be conducting survey, where should we be prioritizing and focusing our efforts in those areas that present the highest level of risk in terms of spread, in terms of introduction. Where are those places in our states, in our area, regions? And using those models will help us determine where to look, and then what's the appropriate response? How can we respond? Is a chemical response the best method? Is there another method that we should be using? Should we consider other things? So it helps us kind of frame how to respond to the detection of a spotted lanternfly population. Objective 2, certainly develop a framework for prevention, early detection, and or response that's scalable and builds capacity in areas of at risk for introduction. So certainly we want to be able to continue that framework of preventing spotted lanternfly, early detection and response that's scalable, certainly something that we can respond to, and certainly something that is within our realm of resources and abilities within our authorities, and something that we as agencies can continue to work on. Certainly objective number 3, implement strategies as determined by assessments. And those are the assessments we're talking about, certainly in objective 1. Implement those management strategies as we find the areas that spotted lanternfly occurs in, where we should be looking based on our risk modeling, using our early detection and response that's scalable, and certainly implementing the best management strategies as determined by these steps. Looking at goal number 2, supporting continued scientific research, again, has 5 objectives under this goal, and certainly is very important long-term for the success of the program as we are challenged with new expansion of spotted lanternfly. Certainly objective number 1, supporting the analysis of spotted lanternfly impacts the U.S. agriculture and natural resources. And this is an important question that has been asked from the very beginning. The impacts that this has on U.S. agriculture, being able to clearly point to and delineate quantitatively what are the impacts, what could the impacts be as it moves into new areas, being able to articulate that and present that and demonstrate that is a very important key as we go forward in supporting the scientific research for the future. Certainly facilitating communication and information sharing on key spotted lanternfly research efforts to deliver practical tools. And this summit's a clear example of something like that. We need to continue to talk about the research that's being conducted, the research and the research conclusions and the science that's being developed that delivers practical tools that also may give us long-term solutions for spotted lanternfly management and use against spotted lanternfly. So, really working so that everybody's aware and informed, and that we're sharing a common understanding of what's available and the best science and research has to offer for practical use in our challenge against spotted lanternfly. Certainly developing effective and innovative biocontrol techniques, again, not just parasitoids, but looking at bioinsecticides, bioherbicides, any other effective biological control techniques that we could bring to the table to use against spotted lanternfly certainly is a long-term goal and is something that we want to continue. Objective number 4, continuing the research support on early detection, survey and trapping tools. Again, we want to be able to respond, but we need to know very early, even as Julie presented in her last presentation, there's a period of time when early detection is really key, and being able to find and detect small populations of spotted lanternfly is certainly very, very important. Being able to survey effectively and then using trapping tools and methods to be able to find spotted lanternfly is also key in the future of the program. Objective number 5, continuing to research, support, and treatment and management tools. We need to be able to respond. And again, we need a lot of solutions, a lot of different tools that we need to use. And treatment and management is certainly one of those sets of tools, that suite of tools that we need to be able to develop further to be able to provide options depending on the site, depending on the state that it occurs in. We need to be able to respond with the best tool for that site and in that situation. Looking at goal 3 and establishment of the national, consistent national and state level outreach message and educational campaign, we have 2 objectives: conducting a coordinated outreach and messaging, targeting priority industries associated with high risk dispersal pathways. So really looking at the industries that are affecting the movement of spotted lanternfly, that are playing a key part in the movement and dispersal of spotted lanternfly, and really targeting those industries to get the message to them and really communicate to them at a national level, at a high level, to be able to get that message to them at the top level and hopefully work to get it to trickle down to the ground level locally, so that these pathways, these transportation pathways, do take a notice and understand that they are really assisting spotted lanternfly in its movement, and they really do play a key part in its further dispersal and movement. Objective number 2, of course, conducting coordinated outreach and messaging to the public. Again, another key partner, and we've seen great examples in all states that have spotted lanternfly. The fact that spotted lanternfly is detected and a lot of times associated with public reports, certainly has been demonstrated time and time again. Certainly in the past year in North Carolina, that was certainly true. But we've seen that time again in some of the new areas as well, where the public has played a key role in reporting the finding of spotted lanternfly in our states and helped us determine and detect spotted lanternfly in areas that we weren't even aware of. Certainly, we want this messaging and strategy to be uniform and consistent across the U.S. So we want some uniformity and some consistency in the messaging and strategy as we go forward with both the public and the industry. And we see this as 2 key objectives under goal 3 within the plan. And so looking at the plan as a whole, we certainly look to build, short-term and long-term goals. So short-term goals, operational and implementation goal, goal number 1, where we want to assess, we want to look at the risk. Where should we be surveying? Where should we be looking? And then how do we respond to it once we find it? And that's some of the short-term goals. And then how do we plan, certainly for states that don't have it, where should they be looking and planning for the future when it may show up? Offering guidance for both spotted lanternfly and non-spotted lanternfly states. The plan certainly gives plenty of opportunity and guidance for both states that have it and don't have it. Allows for on-the-ground decision-making locally, allows for response and building on the response based on the tools and the assessments that we have available, and making those decisions locally based on the sites and based on how we can best approach spotted lanternfly in our state and in the sites that we see it in. Certainly considering the possibility of additional partners. What are the other partners we're not engaging right now? Who are they? Other federal agencies, other state agencies, industry, other groups, that are out there showing an interest, wanting to support us, wanting to work with us in either outreach and education, in survey. Certainly, there have been a lot of clear examples where other groups have come to play a key part in spotted lanternfly operations in individual states. And so we want to consider the continued possibility of expanding our circle of partners that help support the overall plan and the goals within the plan. Certainly, we outline again roles and responsibilities for both APHIS and the states for each goal, looking at the role of responsibility that each agency, group of agencies play in the development and in the implementation of each goal and the objectives under each goal. Certainly, we look to provide scalable options for distributing federal funding amongst those 3 goals. And the plan does very specifically gets into how, some options for delivering or slicing up that funding, how we would develop that funding in terms of where it should be focused. Is that goal 1 under operations and implementation, goal 2, research and support for long-range research, and certainly outreach and education. And so that's important, and how we focus federal funding, especially APHIS's federal funding, amongst those three goals is a very key part of this plan. Certainly making use of current operational tools, but allowing for the development and utilization of new and novel tools. And again, the summit's given us a good example and insight on great ideas, great opportunities for developing further tools, some tools that with further development and further experimentation, we could certainly develop and see in the toolbox in the future, something we want to continue to consider. Certainly reflecting on the current research to providing for future research is a key part. Establishing research, a research coordinating group to consider the direction of SLF research. And so let me talk about this a second. Part of the plan does talk and consider under goal 2, specifically developing a coordinating group that helps facilitate and communicate all the research that's being done, and kind of mixes that in with those that are helping to seek resources to support that research, those that are looking at resources or have resources to support that research, and bringing those two groups together, hearing those great research ideas, and looking at what's needed in the field, what's needed for the future, and then how do we best direct the resources and support and funding to support that research. And so this group will be something that the plan puts forward, and something that we'll be considering as a working group on how we best go about pulling this group together to facilitate and communicate all the research that's going on across the U.S. and considering, how do we best support that research and those research efforts. And so what are our next steps? So we're working on performance indicators right now to measure this plan's success. That's something certainly we'll be doing here in the next couple of weeks. We need a plan that we can continue to look at. It's not a plan that's going to just stay static once we develop it. It's going to be dynamic. It's going to be a plan that we're going to look at, and we're going to have some performance indicators to kind of give us an idea of whether the plan's really working as we intended, or does there need to be some revision or some other consideration that we don't have set forward in the plan. We certainly have been presenting a draft of the plan. The draft was rolled out first to NASDA back on the 14th of February. Then it was rolled out to the National Plant Board on the 21st. And then it's also been along the way shared with APHIS leadership, and it will continue to be shared with everybody as we continue to revise and develop the plan, working towards a final draft around April 1st. So we're going to continue to refine, the draft based on the feedback we get from various groups and people that are taking input. We're looking at updating the plan according to the input that we receive. We certainly look forward to getting input provided. And then we'll be presenting that final plan again, looking towards April 1st to be able to have a final plan ready for presentation and delivery to the three major agencies that have been involved to date, and that is APHIS, NASDA, and the National Plant Board. And then certainly we're going to be rolling out the plan. We're looking for this plan to be implemented sometime this season. It won't be implemented in terms of we'll be doing this plan starting this year. This will be looking to 2024 is when the plan will come into effect. But we'll be talking about how to implement it in 2023. And let me make that clear, is how to implement it in 2023, not actual implementation in 2023, but looking to implement it in 2024. We're certainly looking at how we develop that, or how we develop the rollout to that, to make sure that we get it to the widest audience, the broadest audience, so we can develop, time to talk and have discussions around it, help everybody understand the plan, its objectives, its goals, and certainly the tactics supporting each of it, and how each group or each agency in each state play a part in this overall plan. Let me just shift gears here just quickly and talk about the environmental assessments and give you a bit of an update. The supplemental environmental assessment was announced. The notice of announcement went out in newspapers in the 14 spotted lanternfly states on the 17th of February. That was the supplemental environmental assessment, and that supplemental environmental assessment really covered 4 primary states, and that is Indiana, Michigan, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. It added it to our current EA, and so there's a 30-day public comment period, which is in effect. I will tell you, probably as of today, there will be an extension of about 14 to 15 days to that public comment period that we will be probably implementing based on a delay getting into the stakeholder registry. Was a bit of a delay, and so we'll be extending that comment period another additional 14 days. But we'll be getting and responding any public comments that we get with that supplemental environmental assessment over the course of time after the comment period closes. Once we get those comments, we will respond to those comments, and then we'll be implementing that environmental assessment, adding those 4 states to our current environmental assessment. The programmatic environmental assessment is ongoing. It's being worked concurrently with the supplemental environmental assessment. We're looking to review that programmatic EA very soon. We'll be consulting and have been consulting with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on the environmental assessment, especially on the biological assessment for the program. And we'll be talking further with various agencies and states as we expand this to the rest of the United States with the programmatic EA. We'll be looking to again go to public comment, have a public announcement. We'll roll it out into the newspapers and then allow the public to comment, or any agencies to comment on the environmental assessment as we put it forward. And then we'll be responding to it and then look for implementation sometime later this year. And that will include, with the programmatic EA, will include again the rest of the continental United States in the environmental assessment for the program. So that would again support and provide for APHIS federal funding to respond to spotted lanternfly detections or established populations that may be found. And again, I want to thank everybody. First of all, thank you for the slight change in schedule. I appreciate you, everybody, giving me the time and an opportunity to speak to everybody today. And certainly, I will look to see if there are any questions. Scott, I don't
yeah, there is one question. I don't know what your time frame is or how soon you need to roll out, but there's a question about funding, expected funding goals to implement the plan. If you want to touch on that or type in an answer, I'll leave that up to you quick.
Well, I can certainly talk about it. So yeah, we don't have I wouldn't say they're goals. We have some funding direction, some focus on, again, within the 3 goals that I outlined. Operations implementation is goal 1. Goal 2 is certainly support of research, continued research, and then consistent outreach and education messaging as the 3 goals. We're certainly looking at how we take, again, this is APHIS allocated funding, and how we take our funding and we focus that funding within the 3 goals and support those 3 goals. So how do we break that out? How do we divide that pie? We provided several different options that could be considered, and really we're gonna look to our leadership, of course, within APHIS, and likewise, I'm sure the leadership within Plant Board and NASDA to help us determine, what's the best option and how we deliver that focused funding on which goal. Certainly, one of the things that's been pointed out, and certainly something that we need to consider as a working group, is how do we adapt as the plan goes forward and we see changes. Is there an opportunity to maybe reconsider or consider how the funding is implemented? along those 3 goals. And certainly that's something we need to consider, and something that we need to plan for. It's something that we haven't really done specifically in the plan right now, but it is something we've discussed pretty thoroughly, and I think we'll be continuing to discuss how do we respond, after 1 year or 2 years if the plan, if it looks a little different than what we expect from the plan. Oh, I see Gary did this. So, Gary, great question. And so the National Environmental Policy Act and Endangered Species Act, USDA, we are a client or customer of these 2 policies per se. We do work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service all the time, and EPA, and certainly we went to the Council on Environmental Quality. That is the highest level under NEPA and Endangered Species Act. That is the direct advisor actually to the White House. And we went and consulted with them directly, looking for, a better rapid response in terms of being able to quickly go get an emergency exemption and go forward. And what they came back with was what we're actually implementing right now. And that's a supplemental EA and a programmatic EA. So that's kind of their answer. And they kind of deemed it that it's going to be a case by case, so that we would have to come to them for the future if another pest fell within within this same area. We would have to come back to the CEQ and talk to them directly and consult with them directly to get any exemptions or exceptions to these policies. That's what would be required. That's the process and protocol right now. And that's kind of what agencies would have to do. Certainly something we've been talking about, and specifically looking at the programmatic EA, we've been talking a lot to Mark McLaughlin and in California, is looking at other agencies that are also involved in some of the same actions or the same work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and other agencies, and can we learn or can we build with what they're doing off of what they're doing as a foundation? We're certainly looking at that, and we're very open to that idea. We're going to be having some conversations with Mark. Mark was certainly speaking about CEQA yesterday, and we're looking at that process and how we can best use that.
All right, Matt. Well, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. I know there's a lot of information in there and a lot to go over, a lot of questions, but we appreciate your time and glad we were able to accommodate your schedule change. So moving along, and again, I didn't see any other questions or anything in there, Matt. So I think you're good to sit back.
I'll be around for a little while, Scott. I don't
Okay.
have to run right away, but I do appreciate again making the accommodations for my schedule. So
No, that's great. Thanks for letting us know that. I was going to say you can sit back and relax, and if there's any other questions that come up, go ahead and grab them. Thanks. So moving on, our next presenter is going to be Joy Goforth with the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. And she's gonna give her take on approaches for a new state introduction. So Joy, I see you're loaded. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this opportunity to speak today. It's kind of exciting to tell you what's been going on in North Carolina in the last year, and not really sure how I'm going to encapsulate this much information in 20 minutes, but I promise to do my very best. And I also, if I hit on something that you guys would like some information, we are where we are as a state because other states were incredibly generous to us with their resources, with their information. And I am happy to share anything that we have with any other states who are happy to receive it. So feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions. Just to give you a quick overview of what this year has looked like. It's kind of a blur at this point. We're all pretty exhausted and it feels like it's, we've lived 10 years within this 1 year. But on June 23rd of this year, we had our first actual spotted lanternfly report. We'd had many false reports prior, or reports that were just dead adults that had made their way into our state. So we received a phone call from a business. They were incredibly concerned about reporting the infestation to us because they feared some level of that we would impede their business in some way. And of course, we assured them that was not the case, that we were here to help. And we found on June 23rd, we found a heavy infestation at that location of 3rd and 4th instars, and we were beginning to see some adults, which earned us the prize of the first state to have adults, which was in line with what we expected based on what everyone was predicting, that would be a little ahead of the northern states. And then what is most remarkable, I think, and really what I'm going to focus on today, is that was a Thursday. We got the call at 10. Within 2 hours, and that's about the report in Kernersville is about 2 hours from our Raleigh station. Our spongy moth program manager and our regulatory entomologist were in their vehicle immediately, drove straight to Kernersville, and within 2 hours, we had trained staff there evaluating the situation and realizing that this truly was this was a true infestation that needed to be addressed within 5 days, 2 of those being weekend days. So within 5 days, on June 28th, we had crews there and we began active treatments of that area, utilizing bifenthrin and Transdect. And so we had been prepared for this moment. We kind of we're gearing up for it and we're ready to go. We did our targeted treatments through August 12th. We were doing them 5 days a week, where there were survey and treatment going on actively for 5 days per week. Our staff we had tons of other things to do, and our staff was getting incredibly burned out. So I was very generous and gave them a break. On August 12th, we went from 5 days to 4. So they got Fridays to do all their other work that they needed to catch up on. So we were still doing survey and treatment 4 days a week. And then as of September 20th, we saw egg masses being laid. And again, we were slightly ahead of other states in that area. And then on October 12th, Tree of Heaven was beginning to senesce. Things were beginning to shut down. Our staff was beginning to shut down. Everyone was exhausted. And so we concluded treatments for this season on October 12th of this year. Our goal all along, even before the infestation came, was early detection, rapid response. We were fully planning on eradication if that was possible, and certainly suppression at a minimum. We had ongoing surveying for years, but even in this particular situation with the heavy infestation, surveying was critical, and active treatment was the largest part of what we were doing as well. We utilized technology and a very detailed mapping and data collection system. We backpack sprayers. We had a side-by-side that had a pressure pump as well for our bifenthrin sprays. And again, we used bifenthrin to knock down heavy populations. When we found those, we used Transdect on every single Tree of Heaven that we found within a 1 mile radius of that core point where it was reported. And we do believe that to be the epicenter of the find. So we either Transdect all Tree of Heaven, or we actually used herbicide to remove it. And then we would follow up with bifenthrin as necessary throughout that treatment season. And then our survey really focused on continuing to go out and figure out what the actual radius of our infestation was. I have to brag on, I guess it feels super braggadocious, but we just have an unbelievably dedicated team in North Carolina. And since that initial report on June 23rd, so in less than 4 months, we surveyed over 2,000 properties, which was over 4,500 acres within 5 miles of what is the believed epicenter. We believe the population probably has been here 2 to 3 years. That's our best guesstimate, but it could have even been longer. Again, we treated all Tree of Heaven on more than 180 acres with 309 gallons of Transdect. If you've purchased Transdect, it's incredibly expensive. It's even gone up a little bit, but at the time we purchased it, it was around $17,000 to make 100 gallons of product. You have to use that product on the day that you mix it. It won't hold over until the next day. And so, again, we were very actively applying bifenthrin in the areas that it made the most sense for, where we saw heavy concentrations of insects. And then we used triclopyr as an herbicide to remove Tree of Heaven as needed. And we followed up on every single report that we received, same as what we've always done. But the media really assisted us with getting the word out about Tree of Heaven, about spotted lanternfly. And so we would follow up on every report. We would send one of our trained staff out to do a full survey for everything that we received that we believe even had the potential to be spotted lanternfly. And I feel like it's pretty important to highlight how we got where we were, fully prepared to respond. Again, early detection, rapid response. I can't say it enough. That was the mantra that was given to us. And when we asked other states, kind of what should we do? What should we do that's a little different? Jumping on it early was always the answer. And the one regret that some other states had was waiting to respond. And so we secured our funding in advance. Again, we got PPA 7721 funding. It had it for several years to do Tree of Heaven surveys. And with that, we were also surveying for spotted lanternfly. Our nursery inspectors were at every single inspection. We're also looking for spotted lanternfly while they were out. We ensured that we had Transdect and other products on hand. In addition, we ensured that before it got here, that Transdect was labeled to be used in North Carolina for spotted lanternfly, as well as the other products that we were using. It's kind of a lengthy process and somewhat arduous. So I highly recommend, if you haven't already, go ahead, begin the process to see what you need to do to have Transdect get a special use label for your state. We determined who on staff was licensed to apply pesticides. We're very fortunate. We require all of our field staff to have a pesticide applicator's license. So we have a large group of people to be able to pull from. We evaluated our processes to be able to gain access to public and private land. And I will say that was certainly one mistake on my part, that I was running on assumption of what we had always believed to be true. And we did have to reevaluate a little bit of what it was going to take, but we worked out our processes for not just gaining access where landowners didn't mind if we were there, but what was the process utilizing our regulations to be able to gain access legally and safely for the properties where there was some opposition, or the properties where we had no ability to be able to contact landowners. It was critical that we had an online reporting mechanism. We had one long before we had a report, but our reporting mechanism became bogged down pretty quickly, and we were busy doing lots of other things. So we adjusted that just a little bit to ensure that you had to submit a picture, so it would be a little easier for us to identify. And we developed an auto-generated response so that they got something back saying, if you don't hear back from us, it wasn't spotted lanternfly, contact Extension. They'll help you identify your insect. And then, of course, we followed up on anything that even had the remote potential to be spotted lanternfly. And then we have a GIS analyst on staff. And so we implemented a mapping system within 24 hours of the find. And we tweaked that almost daily to make sure that the data that we were collecting was what we needed to assist us with the best survey and the best response. And now we have actually transitioned that into where we're collecting the same data that USDA needs for their purposes as well. Some of our additional keys to success, we had developed an SLF response plan, which was fantastic, except for it was made so that you would, again, we'd move into these very small infested areas, just a single report, and we would begin evaluating risk and really surveying. We didn't really, where we started in our response plan was at the final page where it was now we begin treatment. And so most of our response plan didn't do anything for us specifically other than help us really think through and vet all possible responses and all possible risks. And of course, there's still things you just leave out, but it was still a great exercise and a wonderful document to have. And be prepared. And it also pulled in other agencies for us to figure out, where they fell into the role of the work that was going to be done for spotted lanternfly. Well in advance, we purchased our chemicals, our sprayers, safety supplies, and we had them stored, ready to go. We had them for several years actually, for when we got that call. Some of our product was actually purchased with some lap salary money we had from years past. So we, again, have been preparing for this situation for quite some time. And we spent a lot of time evaluating what was working best in other states, and what was working best several years ago is not necessarily what's working best now. It's evolving every day, and we stay abreast of that information and make sure that we continue to formulate our plans based on what we know is going on in other states. And whenever there's a new and improved process, we're on top of that as well. We sent staff to other states for training so they could see what was going on. boots on the ground type work so that they could actually see the pest in action. Reading about it is one thing, but actually seeing what's going on with your own eyes does a world of good. And again, I cannot thank Dana Rhodes enough. She really has been my mentor through this whole process and has been so transparent and has provided so many resources. And then David in Virginia has also been completely transparent with all that was going on and allowed our staff to go to Virginia to train as well. So because of the generosity of other states, again, that's why we are where we are, and we're incredibly grateful. But it was also really important for us to determine what other agencies would be of assistance and how that would work for us. In the end, all the work was done by the North Carolina Department of Agriculture staff, which does include our North Carolina Forest Service. They jumped in to help us, and we would have gotten a fraction of the work done if they had not been there to assist. We did get some assistance with DOT. It wasn't as much as we would have hoped, but they were, they did everything they could with the resources they had, and we're incredibly grateful. And then USDA, APHIS had teams out there helping us survey and gain acknowledgments as well through that process. And they were out there working hand in hand with us also. And then one thing that was incredibly important for us to have in advance was and I'll show an example, we had some pre-printed door hangers. So when you knock on the door, people either aren't home Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, or they have no interest in answering the door. We were able to leave some information for them to then contact us and follow up, so we could just kind of move along really quickly. We utilize, and there's tons more. I could go on and on about all that we did and what it took to get there. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to try to do my very best to encapsulate it in a short presentation. We utilized our GIS field maps. That was so helpful. And again, we didn't start with the idea of this is what has to be done. We started with the idea of what do we need to collect today? And then the next day, every single day, we would meet with all the staff who was working in the field, find out what their hurdles were, find out where there were gaps in communication, find out what data we could collect that would be helpful and make us more effective. And again, it was 100% a team effort between our field staff and our program managers, our CAPS coordinator, our entomologist, our spongy moth program manager. And again, our field staff was all fantastic. And so this is the example of the door hanger that we created. Again, in the end, we even tweaked it a little bit, and we ended up putting stickers on there so it was crystal clear of like we need to come back and treat, or you need to contact us. And they turned out to be pretty helpful when you leave people information that they can then digest and go to a website and see that what you're doing is reputable. That was incredibly helpful. Again, Sarah Locke, who was our relatively newly hired spongy moth program manager. Thank goodness she has a background in graphic design. And one of the things that we found is in working with the companies that were in that particular area, we started thinking through all the potential pathways, looking at every single risk. And of course, we deployed our canines to follow up on a good bit of that, of what lumber or logs or firewood might have left, where do dumpsters go, looking at all potential risks. But there are a lot of employees that drive into that area. And so Sarah made these cards for us that they fold up into a wallet size document that we could hand out to employees for them to then begin looking to see if they might have transported the lanternfly home from that area. And that was really helpful as well. And we're still utilizing that as an outreach tool. So where are we going from here? The picture on the right, and I want to certainly give credit for many of the pictures we've had before. Those come from the team who's been working in the spotted lanternfly area, and I thank them for allowing me to utilize those pictures. But the picture on your right actually came from our spotted lanternfly site today. We did find an egg mass where there has been some emergence. We have been chomping at the bit, knowing that it's going to happen soon. And so we're on the cusp of it. We know within the next 2 weeks, it's going to be time to gear up and begin our treatments. But how did we get there and what did we decide we were going to do? It is critical for me to not lose any staff over this pest. Again, so much work was done this year and we were all exhausted. The work was predominantly done by our field staff, especially the treatments. And so I wanted to make sure that they were still on board with fighting this as hard as we have been. I didn't want to lose anybody over this pest, and they certainly were. And they're eager to see what methods we're trying and what the response is going to be, and see if we really can knock back this population in the way that we hope that we are going to be able to. So they really fueled the discussion for what we were going to do in 2023, along with pulling in information from those of us who attend all the spotted lanternfly trainings and stay abreast of the most current information. So we're applying the common sense from what was going on in the field and the terrain and the people and the places that we would need to go, along with what we were learning from a national standpoint. So we're going to move forward. Our treatments this year will be concentrated at the times that they're going to be most effective. And we have lots of other work to do. So we took into consideration when our other regulatory programs were going to be at their peak. So we could toggle between the work that had to be done this year. We're going to continue with bifenthrin treatments, and they'll begin at emergence. So again, this picture on the right is triggering that it's time for us to start gearing up and have everything ready to go and get our teams. We're going to come here and stay in the heart of this area so we don't have so much transportation back and forth. And we're going to hit the insects with bifenthrin and emergence and do heavy bifenthrin treatments in those areas with the concentrated egg masses that we have found. And then we're going to follow up with later treatments, herbicide treatments of Tree of Heaven. And then we're also going to continue to use Transdect on Tree of Heaven as well. And then, but we're going to focus on commercial properties. Last year, we did every single property, commercial or private homeowner. We believe we're going to get the most bang for our buck if we focus on commercial properties this year, with utilizing some individual homeowner properties that might be a higher risk. And of course, our survey has been ongoing. It's going to continue. The survey and data we collect there is critical. Just kind of wanted to show this map. I want to give credit to our team. It took, they took every single thing they could think of into consideration at the windows of time that we were going to pull together a larger team to come to this area and do very concentrated treatments. Literally everything from when our state fair was going to be and staff is going to be stretched thin there to when we were setting traps for other programs. Along with, the life cycle of Tree of Heaven and when insects would be present. So, we were really, I feel like they have thought through every possible scenario. And with that, again, I feel like I did kind of an absolute whirlwind tour of what's happened in North Carolina in the last year, but I am incredibly proud of our team and their dedication. And I feel like we have, I don't know how we could have thrown more at it than we did this year. And we're going to go at it a little, work a little smarter next year rather than harder, hopefully, and put a hurt on the population that's here, while we're still continuing to follow up and respond to any reports that we get, because I don't, there's every chance that that this will be the summer that we find out we have another population somewhere else, and we'll have to shift and go. Hopefully that will be an early detection and rapid response situation there. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Thanks, Joy. That was, I guess if there's a lesson to be learned, it's expect the unexpected, right?
Yes.
Even if you think you're prepared, you're not fully prepared. There are a couple of questions in here that I think are probably more appropriate for maybe you to address in typing, but there were two questions that were somewhat similar regarding your laws and property admission and treating on private property. So did any owners refuse to grant permission to treat? And then what law specifically allows you to enter and give permission to treat on private property?
Certainly. And that is every state is different, I have learned. And so we do have our plant pest law does allow us to go onto properties. However, we did have to work through our legal team. And so if someone refused entry to us, we would send them a certified letter explaining that we would do everything we could to try to work with them in advance. And we did have a large landowner in this area who owns multiple properties, who there was some resistance, and in the end, we were able to work through that and get permission to treat. But we had certified letters explaining what our legal right was to be on their property. We would mail them that certified letter and ask for them to give us a contact back. Thank goodness we never had to implement this, but they had once they received that, they then had 5 days. And after that, we would have showed up with law enforcement to come treat that property. Again, we never had to exercise that. Almost everyone here was amenable to having us on the property. And But there certainly were some challenges. But yes, every state is different. Our law does allow us to be on those properties for survey. It was the treatment that caused a little bit of pause, and we dug in and worked with our legal team, and that was what we came up with. I hope that helps. Feel free to shoot me an email if I need to be more clear on that.
No, I think that was great, Joy. Go ahead.
Well, I was looking at Gary's question, that able to use federal funds to purchase and use the pesticides. Well, I mean, you can purchase the pesticides, whether Gary Fish asked if we could like Transect, I'm assuming is what you're talking about specifically, because we were already included in the EA. I mean, you can buy a Transect. It's labeled for lots of things. So for instance, our Forest Service is buying it and using it for hemlock woolly adelgid, just at a much less rate. So, it's a product that's already out there. Purchasing it wasn't the issue. So no, it didn't require, and in our actual work plan, our specialty crop block is how we bought Transect. It wasn't until after we had an infestation that we rewrote our work plan to use our PPA 7721 funding to buy some more Transect, if that helps. And Jules asked if that photo of that egg mass was taken today. Yes, literally before I came here. I'm kind of glad we're not doing video, because I've been walking through the woods and I look like it. And so yes, it was the only egg mass we found with emergence, but yes, that was taken today. Let's see. And Michael Hutchinson asked about our population densities. Michael, if you'll shoot me an email, I'll be glad to share the information. We have some maps. I'll be able to show you some of that information, and I'll probably connect you with our entomologist, who could answer that probably a little better than I could.
Thanks, Joy. And there was one other question there from Phil about the formulation you used. If you want to address that quickly, or type that one in, I think you probably answered
Sure.
pretty quickly.
It was a Transect water soluble powder, yes, and we use I don't want to say it on a recording. I think it's 12 packs per gallon. I think that was the rate we used, but don't quote me on that. And I will, I can send you the concentration that we used. It's a lot. There is a lot of product in a gallon, and that is what the special use label assists us with.
We appreciate it, Joy. Thank you so much. Are you going to be around for any more questions that may pop up?
I am. I'll keep answering them. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Moving on, our next presenter with a similar situation approaches to a new state introduction is going to be Robert Miller with the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. Robert, are you on, ready to go?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I'm going to show my presentation here. Let me know if you can see it.
Yep, I will. Not yet.
There, how about that?
Yes, sir. You're good to go.
Okay, great. So we are in a similar situation as Joy and the folks down there in North Carolina, and we had spotted lanternfly arrive, was detected in August of this past year in 2022. And I just have a presentation here that's basically going to cover 3 different aspects. So basically we'll discuss the basics of spotted lanternfly being found in Michigan, those conditions and where it was and how we found it. And then we'll sort of jump backwards in time a little bit. We'll talk about how we prepared for that find, what we had ready to go, and maybe some of the things that we didn't have ready to go. And then the last section will be our initial actions, how we responded once it was found and we figured out the extent of the infestation. So starting at the top, right? So spotted lanternfly was reported on a Friday, of course, at about 3 o'clock. I think it was August 8th. And it was basically reported to MDARD from Michigan State University. Dr. Deb McCullough called me up. One of her colleagues was actually doing outreach on, I think it was entomology, basically an entomology outreach, and I think proper insecticide use at an industry event. And someone approached the extension specialist after, actually a faculty member, I believe, after the presentation and said, "Hey, what's this insect? We've seen it in our nursery, and I've had our spray guys come out and spray for it, and I still see it." And like, wow, that's spotted lanternfly. And that's that image we have here, right? Is this kind of spotted lanternfly on the underside of a maple leaf. And this was in Oakland County. Oakland County is northwest Metro Detroit. It's a very heavily populated county. And it's exactly the kind of place that the models predict you would find spotted lanternfly. So this was most likely brought into Oakland County on nursery stock, right? So we got this report of one individual insect, a photo, and we talked to the person who took the photo, and she said, "Oh yeah, we took that right at the nursery. We took it a week and a half ago. I can show you which tree we took the photo on." So one of our field staff went out that Friday. They didn't see anything, but then they went back out on Monday, right? And on Monday, they did find some old egg masses, some egg masses that had previously hatched, whether it was earlier in 2022 or potentially in 2021. We couldn't tell. It looked, by the shape that the egg mass was in, the level of degradation, it looked like it wasn't that old, right? Now, one thing to know about this nursery is this is not a typical nursery. This is not Lowe's or Home Depot or, the little stand on the side of the road. This is a nursery retailer that specializes in very large, high-value nursery stock. As you can tell from this photo here, this is actually a photo from nursery. These individual trees, you need pieces of construction equipment to move them, right? So let's take a look at the site where spotted lanternfly was found. So first thing I want to point out is this particular piece of property that's highlighted here, this kind of dogleg piece of property, is owned by Oakland County. And the nursery retailer where we found spotted lanternfly initially is on this. They rent the space that they're on. They lease it from Oakland County. There is also another nursery that actually just borders that northern crook there, that northern dogleg, right? So we've got two nurseries on this property. And of course, that has regulatory implications. Other facts about this piece of property: there is a wastewater treatment plant on the piece of property here, basically right over the address there, right next to the freeway. And there is an enormous Amazon fulfillment center directly to the east of this property. It's actually the site of the old Silver Dome, which the Lions used to play in, right? Now, the good news is we have a single landowner here. It's Oakland County, right? And they have their own pesticide applicators, their own staff, their own whole department full of people who know how to use insecticides and herbicides and have treated Tree of Heaven in the past. So the one, really big piece of take-home advice I can give to everybody on the call who doesn't have spotted lanternfly yet is make sure that spotted lanternfly shows up on a piece of county property in your state, and they have a whole staff and a whole budget to buy chemical with. And that particular county, when you talk to them, they go, "Yeah, sure, let's address this." The one thing I want to highlight here, all jokes aside, is that working with Oakland County, they've been an excellent partner. Every step of the way, they've been just as eager to address this problem and suppress this population of spotted lanternfly as we are. And so we've been very fortunate in that regard. Now, taking a look at that same piece of property there, again, that dogleg piece of property, we did some initial looking. We got a big team of folks out there in September. Actually, it was in August. We went out and we delimitated the site and figured out where spotted lanternfly was and where it wasn't at that site. And we did find heavy concentrations sort of in the northwest corner. And we have a couple trees that we call the mother trees because they were kind of loaded up with egg masses, and they were very close to this nursery property. And that's where we eventually found some old egg masses. So the situation, when we were first responding those first couple months, we found egg masses in the nursery on stock that had arrived in 2022. We didn't find egg masses anywhere else. So we thought, well, maybe this is just this year's population. Maybe these select few spotted lanternfly, we're not seeing hundreds and hundreds, but these spotted lanternfly that we're seeing, they've arrived just this year. Well, a month later, while we were out there doing more delimitation work, then we found some old egg masses, and looking in that area of high concentration, we found even more old egg masses. So it looks like we're looking at a population that arrived in 2021 and was detected in 2022, which makes sense. This retailer, frequently received the same type of stock from another nursery retailer in New Jersey, and that's likely the pathway. It came from New Jersey to Michigan on as egg masses on this sort of high value nursery stock. So jumping back in time, before anything was detected or reported to the Department of Agriculture, let's take a look at the preparation that we had here at the state and our level of preparation. And the first thing I want to highlight are our relationships with our partners. Right, we've been very fortunate that we have excellent working relationships with sister agencies here at the state, Michigan DNR, or the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, EGLE. We have a very good working relationship with Michigan State University and Michigan State University Extension. And we actually get a lot of our technical guidance from them. We take a lot of scientific technical questions to them, specifically Deb McCullough, about what types of insecticides at what concentrations would nursery stock need to be sprayed at if they want to ship it off site, during the time of year when spotted lanternfly are potentially laying eggs. Those sort of heavy technical questions. We have an excellent relationship with USDA APHIS PPQ. They have an office in Brighton and another one in Romulus, which is, I think, kind of both coming in from the west and from the south to get to this Oakland County site. It's probably about an hour away. And then also throughout the state of Michigan, we have cooperative invasive species management areas, or SISMAs. And that's basically groups that are born of conservation districts across the state, where these SISMAs are organizations, they're funded by the state, partially funded by the state, that are boots on the ground folks in a lot of cases. So these SISMAs will cover 2, 3, 4, 5 counties, and they have folks who are regularly out either scouting for or treating or doing education events related to invasive species. So again, another partner, Oakland County SISMA, in responding to this event, right? And before we leave this slide, I'll probably touch on this theme a couple more times, but communication, in my experience in going through this and with a couple other detections here in the state, communications is probably the trickiest aspect of this, because as a prevention and response specialist, which is my title, I don't think a whole lot about communications. That's not the first thing that comes to mind. The first thing that comes to mind when they say, oh, we have spotted lanternfly is, okay, we got to go out, we got to do delimitation. How are we going to do treatment? What time of year is it? When can we get the chemical in the tree of heaven? Communication is thought 6 or 7, right? And there's a million thoughts going on. Well, communication is difficult and difficult to get right, let me say. So that's probably a theme I'll touch on a couple times throughout the presentation as we go forward. So the next few slides will be sort of the tools that we had at our disposal. And this is a theme that's been touched on in other presentations, but GIS capability, right? That is critically important to keep track of what we've done, what we need to do, where we are, right? And it helps us really track a complicated situation with lots of players bringing information in. And we actually share, we have a web map that we actually share with Oakland County and with USDA APHIS. So we have 3 different groups that are adding information to this map, right? And one of the things that we've used this GIS for, or our GIS systems for, with the ArcMaps tool, is basically sort of real-time GIS when we're out in the field. And I've got a slide, we'll touch on that later, right? So, the things that you're capturing in your GIS systems when you're doing this is, where exactly did you find spotted lanternfly eggs in adults? Where's the tree of heaven? Which ones are you going to treat with herbicide? Which ones are your trap trees, right? Where, are your trap trees in the right location? Are they right next to the infestation? Are they too far? Do you need to maybe have some trap trees closer to a particular area, if you can find any tree of heaven, right? And then also for regulatory purposes, we had a generally infested zone, which was a 4-mile radius from the site. And then we actually have two types of compliance agreements for nursery retailers, one for nursery retailers within the generally infested zone and one for retailers outside of that zone. And then lastly, the GIS data is good for making PowerPoints. So one of the other tools at our disposal that was very helpful was this reporting tool. And the reason what we had put this together and we had this thing ready to go was from a presentation I saw probably 2 years ago or 3 years ago at this very meeting, right? And it was folks from Pennsylvania talking about the sheer volume of reports that they were getting for spotted lanternfly. And at that time, I thought to myself, well, I don't want that to be the fate of my email inbox, and I don't want my phone ringing that much. So we put together a standalone spotted lanternfly reporting tool. And this is something that we had put together, I think 2 years ago or a year ago in preparation for spotted lanternfly showing up. And it's basically a web form that's associated with our Eyes on the Field tool that is hosted through a DNR website. And this is a place where folks would come here, they'll be directed here in all of our outreach to report any suspect spotted lanternfly, right? And this information goes into a simple database that allows our staff to follow up on it. It's scalable. We can have as many people as we need in there checking reports, right? And, this thing was sitting completely ready. We had decided we would not advertise this tool or include it in any of our outreach until spotted lanternfly was detected in the state. Because until we had a confirmed detection, we wanted spotted lanternfly reports going into our other established reporting channels, specifically missing, right? But, I can tell you, it was very satisfying to go through those first couple of days of, okay, it's been found. We did delimitation. We know where it is. It's not just one or two insects. It's not just a regulatory incident. To just send like a 2-sentence email to the IT administrator saying, okay, flip the switch. And then taking that little web address and be like, okay, we're putting this in all of our communications, put it in the press release. So having that good to go and ready to flip the switch on it's one less thing to think about as you're responding. The other set of tools, or even you could think of it as an entire toolbox itself, is our communications materials. So I think more than 3 years ago, we put together a series of groups that were tasked with preparing for the arrival of spotted lanternfly. One of those groups was the spotted lanternfly communication subgroup. And it had folks from my department, Department of Agriculture, Michigan State University, and the DNR on it. And we put together a whole communications package. We had a communications plan. We had a first detection press release, basically with some blanks in it. Spotted lanternfly was found at blank location on blank date, ready to go. So when we found it, again, we pulled the press release out, filled in the blanks, updated it a little to reflect the situation, and that was already taken care of. With talking points, we had a couple of presentations that we had already, just based on doing outreach. The pest alerts, which we see here, some posters for rest stops and fact sheets, stickers, a trifold pamphlet, some like a spotted lanternfly identification handout, a tree of heaven identification handout, and even a movement checklist. And again, having all of this stuff complete and waiting for when when spotted lanternfly shows up, because we knew it would, was, again, that's one less thing to think about, right? Because there's a million things to think about when spotted lanternfly arrives. Okay, so third part of the presentation here, initial actions. Well, what did we do when spotted lanternfly showed up? It was great that we had everything, not everything, but a lot of stuff ready to go, right? So one of the first things that we did here at the state, and this was an MDARD specific action, was that we implemented an incident command system, right? So Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, we train just about all of our staff, our field specialists, and our managers on the use of the incident command system, right? The incident command system is how, the federal government and states respond to emergencies. It's a very well-developed system with all kinds of training materials, different training sessions, right? And incident command systems are scalable. You can actually use incident command systems to plan a wedding or respond to a Category 5 hurricane. And finding spotted lanternfly in your state falls somewhere in between planning a wedding and responding to a hurricane, right? And we actually have quite a bit of experience using incident command systems here in MDARD, from responding to Ralstonia showing up in the state, or our detection of balsam woolly adelgid that we responded to. So we have folks that are familiar with it. We train on it regularly, we keep current, and we had people that we could put in various roles to address different aspects of this response. And, you know, when things are developing and you're getting information and more reports and figuring out what you're going to do and dealing with the fact that you found spotted lanternfly in August, right, which is a very small window to do any sort of chemical treatments, this was very helpful. So we had an incident commander, and reporting to the incident commander is a liaison person in safety and communications. Operations section chief, that was myself. Within operations, we had regulatory, survey and trace forward, data management and treatment. Each one of those folks was responsible for that aspect of our response. You know, we had logistics, planning and finance, right? And so a lot of these positions were filled by folks who don't normally think about responding to invasive species on a daily basis, right? But because of the training with incident command systems, they were able to get into position, know what they need to know, and then we all started working together to respond. And this was very helpful. It helped us get through that, you know, really difficult sort of first initial phase where you're ramping up and figuring out what you're going to do and who's going to do what. And after we had that initial phase figured out and had our partnerships developed and cemented, especially with Oakland County, we were able to disband the incident command system for now and sort of then continue on with the response, right? But if we find another site here in Michigan, we may start up the incident command system. It may be smaller than this, it may be larger than this. It is scalable. All right. So one of the aspects, you know, once we were organized as a trace forward, okay, well, we had some nursery stock arrive in 2002 that had egg masses on it. Where did it go? Is it all still at the nursery? Has it been planted all over Metro Detroit? Did they sell stuff down into Ohio? So we did trace forwards. And again, very fortunate, you know, if your business sells trees that are worth $7,000, $10,000, $12,000 a piece, it turns out you have pretty good records where each individual tree went. So our field staff went and conducted trace forwards and coincidentally got to go to a lot of very nice institutions and pieces of property, right? We looked at all of the large caliber nursery stock that left that facility. They did sell some smaller stuff, but we looked at about, I would say, over 90% of the material that left that site. And 3 trees were found to have egg masses at 2 sites. At those 2 sites, so there was no indication of spotted lanternfly at the site. And based on the sale date of those trees and when they were moved to their new property, it was very likely that the eggs had hatched before the trees were moved off of the nursery location. You know, having said that, these sites will continue to be monitored. So treatment, okay, so on that site, that Oakland County site, the large trees were first injected with imidacloprid. That's what was on hand. That's what the county had. That's what they were familiar with. That was the first thing that we could do. Remember, you know, from the minute you find it in that second week of August, the clock is ticking, and it's ticking quickly. That season isn't going to last very long. So right about the time we finished the first round of imidacloprid treatment, we then used dinotefuran, right? Because dinotefuran is faster acting, right? And it's going to provide suppression more quickly. Smaller tree of heaven were sprayed with herbicide, triclopyr. And then actually over this winter, egg masses were scraped. And then this treatment will continue in 2023. We're continuing to work with the county, right? And we'll go out and we'll do some more looking to see if we can find any evidence that spotted lanternfly has spread beyond the site. But, you know, I mentioned earlier how helpful GIS was, right? And I want to touch on how we used our GIS system in real time to organize work that was happening in the field. So when we did our initial delimitation survey, we had folks from USDA, DNR, Michigan State University, AmeriCorps, a county person on one day, right? So you have a diverse group of people who don't necessarily work with each other. They don't have each other's phone numbers. The first thing you do in the morning is everybody says their name and what they do and where they're from, right? So how do you get all these people working together and moving across this mixed use landscape in Metro Detroit and coherently looking for spotted lanternfly across a grid, right? So we used a grid layer on ArcMaps, and folks were assigned to grid cells. They paired up in teams of 2. Okay, you guys are going to go to E6, and when you're done with E6, look at all the grids surrounding that. Now take team 2, you're going to G5, right? So we would send everybody to different grid cells, right? And as they're working, they can highlight that grid cell on ArcMaps and indicate that it has been visited. And then once that grid cell has been visited and they indicate that it's been visited and they submit their data, it turns red. That just means that we checked it, right? Well, that data gets simultaneously updated on everyone else's phone. So this group of 14 people, right? We make sure at least one of the people in the team has access to ArcMaps. And that was folks at MDARD and USDA, right? They can all work together. They can work sort of autonomously in the field, going around collecting data, and we're not duplicating efforts, right? So that's the best way to work with a sort of an emergency response team that got assembled in 2 days and put out in the field to collect data, right? So shifting gears a little bit. So compliance agreement, what are you going to do to slow the spread? How are you going to make sure that spotted lanternfly doesn't leave this site that it's on currently? Well, Michigan, we're using compliance agreements, right? We have 2 types of compliance agreements. We have one for an infested area and one for an uninfested area. The infested area is a 4-mile radius around that initial detection. It'll be updated if we find infestations in other parts of the county or other parts of the state. But the compliance agreements allow for movement of nursery stock if the staff are properly trained and mitigation requirements that are set by the state are met. We have a training module that the staff have to take. They have to take an online quiz afterwards and pass the quiz. And then they enter into a compliance agreement with the Michigan Department of Agriculture. And those compliance agreements are closely tracked by field staff and specialists. Okay, we're in the home stretch here. It's the lessons learned slide. All right, so thinking about this event and the things that we had done right and we had ready to go, and the things that didn't occur to us, and you sort of learn as you go, right? The first thing from my perspective, the big one, is have a communications plan and a media package ready to go. Because you really don't want to be in the graphic design meeting for the spotted lanternfly handout when you should really be out in the field trying to find out where spotted lanternfly is, right? And again, that communications plan, when it's first detected in the state, when your division director says, your department director says, oh, I got to go talk to the head of the department. Well, the head of the department wants to talk to the governor, before the press release goes out. And by the way, don't tell any of the other folks in these or that agencies, because we don't want anybody talking to the media. Have something like, have that discussion with the other programs, departments, institutions, agencies that you work with about, how long it is before you're going to let them know. Do you let them know right away? Some folks, yeah, because you're going to be working with them tomorrow. Other folks, maybe the day after. Maybe you've got a plan to notify everybody the minute the press release goes out. But whatever that is, you got to work that out with everyone, right? Because folks want to know, right? Outline of your regulatory framework. We had met about a year before spotted lanternfly was detected, and we had that conversation about whether we would implement a quarantine or use compliance agreements and why. And we had that discussion. We had made some decisions, but we didn't have any compliance agreements ready to go. We didn't have a training program ready to go. We knew we were headed in that direction, but again, once it was detected, that was one of the things on the list that you have to do. Okay, let's get these compliance agreements fully flushed out and get this training program stood up. So that's the kind of thing that the incident command system handles, right? Response plans, that written response plan that says, what you're going to do, that hopefully has some communication package in it, it has its place, right? One thing I've noticed is that we'll write response plans, and when the event actually happens, everybody's so busy and moving so fast, no one pulls out the plan, right? And I joke with Robin Rosenbaum, we talk about it, the best or the most value you get from the response plan is in the writing of it and in the thinking of all of those steps. Because once you're in the thick of it, you're moving so quick. I wish we had pulled out the plan and looked at it. It's like, because we had a whole draft plan. We had never actually finalized it. We had a draft. And we said, okay, we got to do this, this, and this, and these orders, and we should notify these people. But have a response plan. It has its place, right? But then once the rubber hits the road and you've got very certain set of conditions at that site, things are going to evolve quickly. Determine the best way to handle those high volume calls and emails. This is the kind of story that media is going to pick up on. It's going to go out. It's going to get coverage. They'll want somebody to do interviews, and you'll get reports. We had our reporting tool ready to go. I'm glad we had it. We got a whole lot of reports. Staff were able to respond, right? And then the last one is there are more egg masses than you think, right? We had done an initial sort of egg mass survey, right? And on that initial survey, we had found like 45 egg masses on a number of trees in the field. And that was done quickly to sort of find the scope of the situation, right? Well, then we had a dedicated time in February where we went out and we destroyed egg masses. We scraped them. Well, when we went out in February, we found right about 500, little under 500 egg masses. And even in doing that, this area where we had the highest concentration of spotted lanternfly, on the first day of egg mass scraping, folks had gone through there very carefully, grid by grid, and scraped every single egg mass that they saw. They spent the entire day in a 1.3 acre area. It was like 6 people just scraping egg masses. We talked about it on the morning of the next day. And we said, okay, because of our egg mass survey that we did earlier, we know it's just a few further from here, and those have been handled, and those areas around there have been looked. Let's look back through this area again. So we went through that same 1.3 acre area again, this time with some slightly different weather conditions. It was actually cloudy on the second day, sunny on the first. And we found 100 more egg masses that we were able to scrape and destroy. So the one thing that was really brought home to me being at that site is that whether you see the egg mass or don't see the egg mass is going to be impacted by a lot of things: time of day, position of the sun, cloud cover, whether the trees are wet because it's rained or not. One of the big things that stood out to me was on certain tree species, if it rains, that egg mass is really going to stand out because the bark gets a little darker when it's wet. So we were out there once right after it had rained, and we had found some egg masses that we hadn't seen before. So those are my takeaway lessons there. I think the last slide here has my contact information on it. Yep, cell phone and email, if there are any particular questions.
Thanks, Robert. I don't see any questions. I thought there was maybe one in the chat. Oh, about the number of trees sold and shipped off site from the trace forward. Do you have a number on that, quick?
I don't have a number right at my fingertips. I mean, we have an Excel spreadsheet that they worked off of. Amy Kennedy would know, but I don't know if Amy's on the call. She can pop into the chat and let us know. But it wasn't in the thousands. It was in the hundreds, again, because those were really large trees that had to be moved, with construction equipment.
Okay. And there was another question that just came in from Amanda. If you can jump on there and type that answer, we'll keep moving along to Sal in New Jersey. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. Saul Vaiciunas from the New Jersey Department of Agriculture is coming on next to talk about New Jersey's efforts to manage spotted lanternfly. Saul, are you on? Ready to go?
I am here. I guess I'm hitting share screen now. Oops, I meant to hit PowerPoint. Let me try that. Okay, share. And go. Can you hear me and can you see it?
We can hear you and see you, and you look good to go. So take it away.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to be talking about New Jersey's response to the spotted lanternfly. See if I can, and it's not advancing. There we go. Okay, so missed a slide. There we go. In this presentation, I will cover the work done by NCDA and PPQ to detect, delimit, and control spotted lanternfly in the federally funded program. I'm going to briefly touch on outreach activities, and then I will end with talking about the new state-funded program we have. What I will not be covering is research done by Rutgers and research done by the Philip Lampe Beneficial Insect Laboratory and other work done by Rutgers. I'm just not going to be covering it, but I just wanted people to realize that there's more than just what's in these slides. Okay, so 2014 to 2017, this is before we found it. We knew about the find in Pennsylvania, and so NCDA and PPQ conducted inspections of stone yards, and I think there was about 12 stone yards with a history of doing business with the stone yard in Pennsylvania where it was first found. So we did visual inspections, did not find anything. That was for a couple of years we did those. NCDA began including spotted lanternfly as part of routine outreach. We already had a forest pest outreach program going. We responded to all reports of spotted lanternfly during those years. PPQ organized a one-day survey in Phillipsburg, New Jersey, with participants from several states, both state and federal. We did not find anything that day. And we even sent some inspectors to Pennsylvania to see the SLF live and in person. And I really think that's very beneficial until you've seen it yourself. I remember when we first started, I would go out and looking at a lantus tree. I'd be staring at it saying, I wonder, does that look like weeping sap? You know, and once you've seen it, then you know, you have confidence of what you're looking for. Also, during this time period, we had a Farm Bill funded Goal 1 survey for spotted lanternfly. We had high-risk sites selected for visual survey, over 50 sites in the survey. Sites such as stone importers, transport companies, truck stops, rest areas, a lot along east-west highways and along the Delaware. No SLF finds. Basically, before 2018, you couldn't find a live spotted lanternfly in New Jersey. A couple of dead ones, but no live ones. Then in 2018, we had a much larger survey funded by PPQ and focused basically on the grid survey. So you see the grid there, and there's a map of New Jersey. The grid survey was based on computer modeling, and essentially something that's red is a high likelihood of finding spotted lanternfly, orange less so, yellow even less so, and green was the least. And we were conducting surveys on these grids in two-man teams, two-person teams, I should say. And we did find spotted lanternfly nymphs in the summer of 2018 through survey work, which is notable because in the past, for example, when we first got Asian longhorn beetle, we found it through a report from the public, while we were doing grid survey, but it was more like an outreach success in finding it then. And also with emerald ash borer, we were doing purple panel trapping, and there was actually a report from the public that first found it. But in this case, the grid survey proved to be more valuable, and we did find it through grid survey. So I guess I'll keep going. So this is a map. I actually got this from Rutgers. These are reports by the public in 2018, 2019, and 2020. I don't know if the top is cut off for everybody. And it's reports by the public, but it gives you a good sense of how spotted lanternfly expanded into New Jersey over those first few years. And so I'm going to show you next our quarantine map, but keep this map that you're looking at mine. I'm going to leave it up for a few more seconds. you can see a real fast spread. New Jersey is probably considered the most densely populated state in the union. We have a lot of highways, rail, a lot of traffic, people coming from Pennsylvania, going to New York City, going to Atlantic City, going to the Jersey Shore. There's a lot of movement. So here's maps of our quarantines. In 2018, we initiated a quarantine on 3 counties, Warren, Hunterdon, and Mercer. Warren is the county where we first found it. But you can see how these maps follow the same sort of pattern as the reports in the previous slide. And you can see just how quickly it spread across the whole state. Okay, so but a top cut off on all of these, aren't they? This is a joint state and federal program. It is one single program. We always work together so far, especially during treatment season. I can move that. This is federally funded again by USDA. State and federal staff work together. You can see them all sitting there in a training session. You wouldn't be able to tell the state workers from the federal because they all work together. This is not a static program. USDA has changed the protocol over the years to make improvements to it. And I think that's an important thing to note, that it hasn't been just static. In the beginning, when we first started this, you had to spray paint all the trees either blue or red by hand. You had to mark each and every tree in an iPad. Later on, we shifted to the use of polygons to group up the trees to be more efficient. It used to be that we would hire contractors through USDA to do the spraying, and then we shifted to our own workers doing the spraying. We used to do quarter-mile buffer zones, and we shifted away from that. We used to spray around vineyards. We shifted away from that. There's been many changes over the years. I can't really cover them all, but just to be aware that this program constantly tweaks itself to be better. And okay, so 2018 to 2019, that's when we first started. We were in eradication mode. Our outreach message was see it, report it. The eradication work was largely located near Powhatan, where we first found it, and the surrounding areas. We responded to all reports, email, phone, or what have you. And we adopted an SLF permitting system from Pennsylvania. Oops. Trouble there. Then, starting in around 2020 to the present, we transitioned away from using contractors for spraying. We started spraying ourselves, so we had to get pesticide applicator licenses and pesticide operator licenses for those hourly workers. We shifted from eradication to slow the spread. And when you do that, you have to prioritize your locations. So the priorities became seaports, airports, train yards, and high volume shipping operations. Here is some historical program data for New Jersey over the years. I don't really think you need to memorize this whole chart, but what you can gain from looking at it is just that the program grew in scope each year by quite a lot. I guess an interesting one to look at might be acres treated, tens of thousands of acres treated. It's a little tricky to go by acres because we've shifted over the years from a focus on, for example, a lot of herbicide and relatively few insecticide trees. Later on, it became much more focused on insecticide trees, and fewer herbicide trees and insecticide trees are both more expensive and take longer to make the application. It's hard to compare year to year is what I'm trying to say, but the program has grown in scope and size each year. Challenges for the state response. What I mean by this is, so although we are one program, we all work together, the state government has certain differences and restrictions that the federal government does not. And I know each state is different, so you all might not have the same problems we do, but we are unable to hire salaried staff on federal funding that is year by year. So we have to hire them as hourly workers. And in that situation, they are limited to 944 hours per year. And what we have to do is to keep people year round, we have to shift them to working at a temp agency, which costs more. There's like a 30% extra charge on that. There are no state vehicles for the hourly staff. They drive their own personal cars for mileage reimbursement. That also leads to, we don't ask them to put pesticides or pesticide equipment in their personal vehicles, which means all the pesticides are ferried to the sites by our PPQ staff. There's a lot of turnover in this program, so there's a lot of hiring and training, and then more hiring and more training. So those are some of the challenges on the state side. SLF reporting. Initially, of course, we encouraged reporting. We were in eradication mode. We wanted to know where are the spotted lanternflies. We would run out to every single report and add it to the program, and we were trying to, kill them all. We had a hotline, which was a phone line. We had an email, and eventually a web-based reporting tool. Eventually, spotted lanternfly did spread to the entire state. It was no longer helpful to us to receive reports because it wasn't going to change where our priority locations were anymore. There was a benefit to reporting because it would bring people to our website, and then they could read all the good information we have on our website. But a decision was made to stop taking reports. So as of now, the spotted lanternfly phone line is discontinued. The reporting tool has been removed from our website. We still have an email, and we do monitor that email. And we even went so far as to do a press release to inform the public that reporting is no longer required. Outreach, as I said, I can't cover all the outreach we've done over the years. That would take its own entire talk for that. But I just thought I'd touch on it really briefly because we've done a heck of a lot of outreach to the public. We've got, the message in the beginning, again, was see it, report it. Eventually, it shifted to join the battle, beat the bug, stomp it out. And you can see that boot print squishing the spotted lanternfly, encouraging the public to join in the battle. You can see scraper cards there. And in the middle there, what you're seeing is our aerial banner that was towed along the Jersey shore by an airplane. And we had ads on buses, trains, billboards, boats, the airplane banner, as I mentioned, social media, printed materials, which we, hand delivered to county governments, to municipal governments, to Rutgers County agents. We got all the materials out. There was a lot of in-person presentations, Zoom style presentations, especially during COVID, table displays at meetings and events, and just much, much more. If you need more information about outreach that we've done, our outreach coordinator is Paul Kurtz. I can put you in touch with him. He's done a heck of a lot of work on outreach. Media coverage, also very important. We've done radio, TV, print, online. Well, online's usually part of those. We do press releases. What you're seeing there is our division director being interviewed on TV. Our Secretary of Agriculture is also off there on the right. Media coverage is very, very helpful. You can reach a heck of a lot of people, and they've always been, in my opinion, very fair in their coverage. And you reach a lot of folks this way to get whatever message out that you're trying to get out. Okay, so the state program. So everything up till now I talked about was mainly the federal state program that we always do together. State program is brand new. This past year, 2022, is the first year it was really implemented. One of the most important factors was that we got to hire permanent salaried employees, plant inspectors, who function as team leads. They're pictured there in the circle. So that really makes a big difference rather than having hourly workers supervising and leading hourly workers. They also are going to have state vehicles, which we don't have the vehicles yet, but we'll be able to ferry pesticides around ourselves and cover more ground that way. So that's part of the focus of the state initiative. The rest of it is really, it's a program to reimburse county governments in the quarantine area up to $15,000 per county to reimburse for spraying that they've done for spotted lanternfly. There's a planned increase to bring the county governments up to 30,000 per year. And there's a planned addition of townships or municipalities or cities, however you want to phrase it, to be reimbursed at 15,000. As of now, last year, there were 9 counties that participated, and they have started to send in their receipts for reimbursement. They must show receipts for the supplies, pesticides, cost of labor, backpack sprayers, whatever they bought, make sure that it's allowable stuff. We don't tell the counties where to spray, but they must report to us where they did spray. So far, by and large, in the county governments, it's been county parks. We believe most likely that municipal governments will spray municipal lands and county governments will spray on county lands. But we're not telling them where to spray. And I believe the focus of this is more treating spotted lanternfly as a nuisance pest for the average citizen, rather than, say, our program's goal, which is slow the spread. So the final thing I want to talk about is what we've been doing in our nurseries. We've been spending quite a bit of time at our shipping nurseries teaching the staff at the nurseries how to find and identify the spotted lanternfly egg masses and how to correctly scrape and crush the egg masses. What you see in the top left photo is a typical scraping tool that we use. Anyone who's done emerald ash borer survey will recognize that that is the tool we used to hang the purple panel traps, and it just has a great shape for scraping. I always make the analogy that it's like a dental tool for a dental hygienist to scrape plaque off your teeth. It's just a great thing to scrape and crush egg masses. It's on an extension pole, so we can go from, if it's a 6-foot one, we can go up to 12 feet, or for the 8-foot one, we can go up to 16 feet high. We've been doing this for the last 2 years now, I believe, and we'll be doing it again this year. And we go to shipping nurseries. Not only do we teach them how to scrape, but we help them scrape. You get the entire nursery crew out there. You get the entire spotted lanternfly crew, at least on the state side out there. We all work together with the nursery staff to reduce the number of egg masses, to get rid of them before shipping. And a couple of important things we noticed in doing this, one of them you can see there is there's a lot of deer in New Jersey, and what you see there, the black things and the white things, are deer guards. Keep the deer from rubbing their antlers on the bark of the tree. And the spotted lanternflies just love laying their eggs under those. So we have to pull them up as we go through and scrape each one of those egg masses. Another thing noticed, it's kind of in the middle photo, is a bamboo stake, and you see there's egg masses on the inside of the bamboo stake. So that's another thing we would look for. And another observation that our nursery staff has made in doing this for the last 2 seasons is that the egg masses seem to be, the majority of them seem to be found on maple, styrax, willow, and river birch. So we look at all the trees, obviously, but we pay special attention to those. And okay, that was my entire show. If you have any questions for me, obviously you can put them into the chat, but also my email is there. I'll just leave that hanging for a minute. And I'll be happy to answer any questions via email. I will be sticking around till the end of this presentation today. So I don't know if we're behind. I feel like maybe we are. If you want to go right into the next slideshow, you feel free to do it, because I'm not going anywhere.
You're all good. We appreciate it. There are a couple of questions there in the Q&A for you. If you can handle those, if you're hanging around, I'm sure everyone will appreciate it. Thank you so much. But yep, for the sake of time, let's continue moving. So
okay, so I have to hit stop share and then we're good, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, done.
And thanks again. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Up next, we'll have Jonathan Shields from the Ohio Department of Agriculture discussing Ohio's management of spotted lanternfly. Jonathan, you on, ready to roll?
I am on. Can you guys see my screen there?
Yes, sir. You're good to go. Take it away.
All right. So my name is Jonathan Fields. I'm with the Ohio Department of Agriculture, and I kind of manage our spongy moth program and our spotted lanternfly program, along with some other invasive pest programs that come up from time to time. Today I'm going to kind of focus on what's happened in Ohio in the last year or so. But just to kind of set the scene for you, at the end of 2021, we only knew spotted lanternfly to be infesting 2 counties in Ohio. Those were Jefferson County, which was the first detection in Ohio, in a little village called Mingo Junction. And we suspect that rail traffic brought those there. There's a ton of rail in Jefferson County, right there along the river. And the other find that we were aware of was in Cuyahoga County in the city of Cleveland. And that detection that was first found in August of 2021. Just to kind of further set the scene, we had put some time in, even before the first finds, we had put some time into really getting the message out about the risk of spotted lanternfly, a lot of communication, especially to industry, but also to the public. And we had also developed some reporting tools. Some were as simple as just basic email addresses, but we also had an online reporting tool. And in 2022, the reporting from the public really picked up. So we had a total of 165 reports from the public in 2022. This picture here is kind of representative of what we would get in our online reporting tool. So this is a report from the Columbus area. We do require a picture when people report by this reporting tool method. And this particular report was from a coffee shop in the Columbus area. And very clearly we have a spotted lanternfly there on someone's laptop right there on their table at the coffee shop. So because spotted lanternfly is so recognizable, the vast majority of our reports did include positive pictures or specimens. So 110 of those 165 total public reports did have positive pictures. And we follow up on all of these reports by putting someone out there to take a look. Very frequently, we would have reports like this one in Columbus, where there's a photograph of a life stage there, but we're not able to identify a population in the area. That may be that this guy was kind of blown off course from somewhere a little further out than where we surveyed. It could be that this was a single hitchhiker. But all of these positive reports end up kind of being on our continue to monitor list. The rest of our public reports, some of them were undetermined, and a few of them turned out to be other insects, stuff ranging from stink bugs to Ailanthus webworm and what have you. But they originated from 18 counties of the 88 here in Ohio. So public reporting is not the only method that we had to try and detect spotted lanternfly. We also had 155 circle traps set up in high-risk areas in the state. We focused on sort of the northeast half of the state because of its proximity to known infested areas in other states. And we also looked very closely at transportation hubs where we would have rail or highway transportation. We had 10 total positive traps. They're pictured with the yellow circles on this map here. A couple of those were multiple positive finds in the same trap, so you're not going to see 10 circles there, but this did help us identify a couple of additional detections. So in 2022, we had a number of new detections. It started pretty early in the year. So in February of 2022, we had egg masses reported in the village of Amherst, which is in Lorain County. In Cleveland, we've had additional detections. The initial detections were sort of along rail lines and in industrial areas, and we followed those rail lines out. We found more infestation, and also our partners with the Cleveland Metro Parks really put their networks to use to scout their properties, and I'll talk a little bit more about that partnership as we move along here. Additionally, we had a couple of rest areas. These were positive trap finds in Belmont and Muskingum counties. In Mahoning County, we had a positive report from the public. And then in Cincinnati, the most recent find in Hamilton County, again, a report from the public. And this one was a pretty well-established population just across Mill Creek from a very large CSX rail yard. So we've already talked a lot about how spotted lanternfly moves, but in many of these finds, it's pretty clear what method of transportation was responsible for getting the spotted lanternflies there. And as I mentioned, we also had a number of individual reports where we did not detect populations, but those stay on our list of areas to monitor. So in 2022, we also conducted 29 treatments. All of those were done by ODA staff in cooperation with USDA, and USDA supported us with equipment. We appreciate that partnership as well. Talk more about partnerships as we go along. The vast majority of those treatments were with bifenthrin. We did use golden pest spray oil to do some egg mass treatment. And those all occurred in counties that we've already kind of mentioned here. So moving forward, we have some areas that we're going to try and make some changes, some updates to our program. In the regulatory arena, we are finalizing some updates to our compliance agreement. That's to meet entry standards of states where Ohio businesses are shipping products. And we expect those anytime, maybe as soon as this week even. Then we also will be adding some quarantine counties. Minimally, we'll be adding Hamilton County, where the Cincinnati find was, and possibly some other counties as well. In the spring, we're going to try and time that so that we can get the news out at a time where folks can start to pay attention for nymphs in their areas to try and increase those public reports. And in our outreach area, we received some funding through the Farm Bill for forest pest outreach. This is a sort of general forest pest outreach, so it combines our Asian longhorn beetle program and our spongy moth and our spotted lanternfly and hemlock woolly adelgid and some forest pathogens as well. And this funding is to support outreach to trade shows and conferences, some outreach items themselves. We're developing some materials for educators to share in their classrooms. And we're also putting together a webinar to train partnering agencies and organizations, especially folks who take on a lot of seasonal staff. We want to be able to get them trained as well in identifying spotted lanternfly and how to report. In addition to that, we're seeking some additional spotted lanternfly specific outreach funding in the process of putting those applications together right now in cooperation with OSU Extension, who has really made some strong innovations in outreach, including the use of 3D printed egg masses to do sort of an egg mass scavenger hunt in their trainings to try and get people really get their eyeballs trained to look for egg masses. I think that's going to really result in some additional reporting from industry, especially. As far as treatment goes, we're looking into the possibility of contract treatment. All of the treatments that we've done thus far have been performed using our internal staff. And I think the idea is that we would have a couple of contractors, maybe in multiple areas of the state, that could respond quickly to do that treatment. And it sounds like it's something that's already in place in New Jersey, but some of our partners are looking to put together teams that can treat in their areas, and we're looking to support them, whether it be by funding or with know-how or what. But we definitely want to work with our partners to put together those teams where they can address spotted lanternfly in their areas. And as I mentioned, the partnerships, this is really maybe the most important element of our programs, building and fostering these partnerships with cooperators. The USDA has worked hand in hand with us on trapping, on treatment. They've been there for all of our survey efforts. They help us with data management tools. They're performing just as much outreach as ODA folks are doing. Really can't say enough about the partnership between ODA and USDA in these programs. Our Department of Natural Resources supports our survey teams and also does a good deal of outreach through their networks and provides us with opportunities to conduct additional outreach efforts. I already hit on Ohio State Extension. They do tons of outreach to industry and to the public. They've been involved in our survey, and they also participate in some of our planning meetings and things along those lines. Some of the other groups that have gotten involved, Metro Park Systems, I mentioned Cleveland Metro Parks, Great Parks of Hamilton County. They've had staff come out and participate in survey efforts in their areas. Cleveland Metro Parks has a pretty expansive volunteer network where folks adopt ailanthus that they know of on their properties and monitor for spotted lanternfly. They've done quite a bit of scouting and reporting through the Metro Park system there. Local government staff, their parks folks, transportation people, and they're also providing opportunities for outreach for us and participating in our surveys and helping grant us access to properties that are controlled by the local municipalities. That's been really helpful. Zoos and museums, we have a number of zoos in the state. We've set traps for spotted lanternfly at the Cincinnati Zoo, and they've put up interpretive signage to let folks know what those are for. And I think that's a really great teaching tool for the folks that visit the zoo there. We've done outreach events in forest pests outreach to the Cincinnati Zoo, as well as we have planned outreach to COSI, which is a science museum located in Columbus. So those are other outreach opportunities that you can tap. Educators, again, I mentioned that we're working to put together some materials for educators to teach in their classrooms. We've done sort of guest lectures in classrooms, and especially science and STEM classrooms. And then trade groups, we've worked with, the Ohio wine growers, the Ohio Proud folks who really promote agricultural businesses in Ohio. And tree care folks, obviously we get in front of the tree care folks as often as possible to help multiply our eyes out there. With that, I really want to thank all of those cooperators and partners, and thank you guys for the time here to share a little update on our program. And I'm happy to take questions, or we can save those kind of for the discussion at the end.
Thanks, Jonathan. No, there's one quick, there's a question here about the 3D printed egg masses, and if there's a file available for that. I think that was probably something that you were gonna get a lot of interest in. So any availability of sharing those, the 3D printed egg mass files?
So I can definitely look into that and try and pass that information along. I know that our extension partners were having trouble producing enough of these 3D printed egg masses, given the equipment that they have. So some of the support that we considered seeking in terms of outreach monies was going to try and go towards greater ability to produce those. But that's being done through the Department of Entomology at Ohio State. So I can look into the specifics and try and pass that stuff along.
Perfect, thank you. Up next, we have Frank Bucello from New York Department of Agriculture. He's going to talk about some of their management efforts and I think touch on a pretty novel effort that they've recently partaken in. So Frank, are you there, ready to go?
Okay, I just want to make sure, can you see the screen?
Not yet, but there is a little bit of a delay. So if you do try sharing it, it may take a couple seconds.
Okay.
It looks like it's starting.
Okay, great. Sorry about that.
Yep, you look good to go.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that confusion there. Yeah, and I just I was asked to speak a little about what we've been doing with our way of handling the vacuuming part of it, but just at first to give you a little brief overview of what actually is going on in New York State before we get into that. As you can see, these are the known infested areas that we have in New York State currently. And if you go back to the eDNA map that was shown to us earlier today by Julia Lockwood of Rutgers, you can see it does mirror what we have found. So it is another tool that we can add to the arsenal that we have. Just a brief description of the state. You can see towards the western part of New York, that's the Finger Lakes region. We're starting to see infestations all around that. That's obviously the big area of concern with us because of the wine production, and also further west along Lake Erie, again, thousands of acres of vineyards, Concord grapes for grape juice, the industry. Further east, you can see the southeastern corner of New York State. It's heavily infested from New York City up through Westchester, going up through the Hudson Valley. You know, we have a number of orchards and vineyards in that area. Our concern is too. And then the tip of Long Island, the North Fork, the very known wine region of Long Island. So that is a concern. We have found it there, again, matching with the eDNA finds. So what we're currently doing is we're expanding our survey areas to see how far away from the infestations that are spread, but we're also working on scraping like every other state is doing at this point. But what is interesting about this that matches what everybody else has reported, if you can see the line from Buffalo through Syracuse through Albany, that's Interstate 90, major trucking route. There's also freight train routes that way from Albany straight down to New York City, runs right along the Hudson River. There are freight lines, obviously the I-87, the New York State Thruway, and Route 9W, heavily traveled and trucking routes. Syracuse to Binghamton, I-81, again, right up the corridor of where the major transportation route is, and then going the Southern Tier Expressway, 8617. And trucking routes, railroad routes, we're finding the same thing every other state has found, and it's following that. And obviously that is how it's moving around. We're trying to kind of keep it where it is without expanding too quickly. The Buffalo and Syracuse infestations, they are not large We're trying to do our best to contain them. The further south you get, Binghamton area, and again, further New York City, Westchester, anything south of I-84, which comes right into New York and goes through to Connecticut and Massachusetts. South of I-84, we're considering most of that infested at this point. Up to last year, it had stayed on the western side of the Hudson River. This year, it managed to find where the bridges are, and now it's on the eastern side. Not as much, but we expect that to start expanding pretty soon. We, like other states, we're working with a lot of our sister agencies in the state. We have here collaborating with New York State IPM, DEC, DEP. I don't want to leave anybody out. DOT has been very helpful. The PRISMs, the industry, we're doing a lot of outreach. There's been a lot of media releases, alerting people to be on the lookout for this. It's something that we have to really prepare for this year. Internally, we are certifying our inspectors as Category 9 applicators, so we can also start taking over some of the treatments instead of always contracting it out, or we can contract it out where needed. And moving on, that PPQ, USDA, been a very big help for us. They're working around the ports. They're able to relieve some of the pressure on us. Again, the cooperation we're getting from every one of our agencies that are working with us in the MAC group has been fantastic, and we really appreciate that. So moving on a little to what they had on the agenda as the title, the using vacuums. Vacuuming, it's another tool that we found is being very helpful to us. We're able to slow it down a bit. What we have noticed, certain areas where we've done a lot of vacuuming, and when we do the vacuum, it's not a one-off. We just don't go through an area, vacuum it, and then consider it completed. We'll repeatedly go there on a regular basis. Our field crew that's been doing this last summer has been fantastic. They'll go back to this once a week, go back to an area, do a complete sweep through it. So it's been continual cleaning up of these areas. And what we have noticed and what they have noticed, the populations are not as dense as we would have thought. Egg masses that we've noticed are not as many as we would have thought. So we do feel that we're making a dent in the population. Now, scientifically, if this has something to do with the insect swarming habits that are being studied, I'm not going to say we're going to take all the credit for this. It may be some of the insects' behavior that is doing this, but our observations in the field is we have noticed a decrease and a slowing of the spread when we do this. A good reason for using vacuums also is they're non-chemical based and non-pesticide. The public and the people, they're a lot more accepting of us when we say we're not spraying. Can we go on your property and take care of this? It's very open access for us. It's also good help. We have a situation, Westchester County Airport, there's an infestation around it, but the areas around the airport are protected wetlands, both New York State and federal, DEC and federal EPA. So they can't use a pesticide there. Vacuuming is a good resort for that area. Areas like we have the Bronx Zoo, they can't spray because of the animals and the people constantly coming through. They're using a combination of trapping and vacuuming, and they've reported that they have not had as big a nuisance factor from the insect as they would have expected for the public. Just give you little ideas if these videos can work, just get them. Initially, we just used a plane. This was earlier in the season, going after the nymphs. Can catch quite a few nymphs in one shot. It saves a lot of time, rather than trying to remove them by hand. And as you can see, if you go up the stem, it'll suck it in from both sides, very clean. And you can see on the left, I have a better one coming up in the next slide. You can see the turbulence in the canister itself. It manages to kill most of the insects. So it's not even a matter of worrying, are they going to survive? And what we have done also, excuse me, when the canister is full or we're completed for the day, we'll dump it into a plastic bag, add the alcohol, and that makes sure they were killed. Excuse me. There's an area where we had a heavy infestation on Long Island. What they were doing is just during the summer when the sun was out and it was hot, they dump the insects into a plastic bag, leave it out in the sun, and the heat by the end of their day in the field, insects would have been dead. And they did follow up just to make sure with the alcohol treatment in a sealed plastic bag and then dispose of it. I mean, you could also imagine going into areas with this, some of the public was asking us, why don't we have a sound truck behind us playing the Ghostbusters theme? It actually is kind of cool. But they look at us, they see it, it looks interesting. It becomes very accepted. This next one, you could see we've found some additional tools and attachments for the tubes. Up towards the top, you can see now they have an adjustable right angle attachment, which seems to give us more reach up the trunks of the trees. It also, for some reason, provides some more centralized suction so it can get the insects, because anybody who's done this, I'm sure you've all noticed it, you start approaching the spotted lanternfly and it runs behind the branch or the trunk. So this has enough suction where the trunk is small enough for something like this, it's easier to get them up. So it has helped quite a bit. The way we look at this entire thing, the way we explain it to other people too, it's for every adult female that we can catch, we're preventing 30 to 50 adults next year. So we're continuing on reducing, however we can reduce the population. It's that same numbers battle. If we had that chart, I mean, you may have heard us talk about this. We had prepared a chart that if you left 100 egg masses untouched this year, by the end of the third year, the population just from the exponential growth of those 100 egg masses would be close to 1 million. So the way we explain it, yes, there is no residual effect on this, but would you rather have 4,000 or 400,000? So the purpose of this, again, is to slow the movement. We know this is not an absolute control, and it never will be, but it is an alternative use that we're finding more interest in it. The organic vineyards have expressed interest in this because they don't want to do any other additional sprays if they don't have to. Areas in Staten Island, the borough county in New York City, one of the first areas where spotted lanternfly was identified in New York State. This past summer, a lot of the homeowners were complaining they could not use their properties. They couldn't sit in their backyard, have a barbecue. The infestation was so intense. But I've been checking some of the local newspapers and stuff, and the pest control companies are actually using vacuums on their properties in Staten Island and encouraging the homeowners to do it. Again, anecdotal stories, some of the homeowners and these pest control companies are saying if they vacuum at least once a week in their backyards, they're able to sit back there and enjoy it again. So it helps with the nuisance factor also, which is good, and it also gets the information again out to the public. I noticed environmental agencies, I think one is the New York Restoration Project, they're also recommending their members use vacuums. It's a safe method, no pesticides, to try to get the public who may have feelings that pesticides are not good for the environment, whether they're right or wrong. It's another tool that they can use, and it can help us slowing down the advance of the insect. There was The other thing I have noticed, I'm not on social media a lot, but I started looking into it to see what was going on, if anything else was going on about spotted lanternfly on there. And they're actually, and pardon me, I never thought I'd be using these words in a presentation, but there was an influencer, which is a big thing lately, I guess. And this one influencer who has a TikTok videos of herself vacuuming up spotted lanternflies. And according to this TikTok influencer, she's had over 1 million views of her vacuuming. Whether or not that helps us directly, I'm not sure, but the idea of this is getting out there. The information is getting out to people, the publicity, they're becoming aware of it. New York State, we, as I said, we're preparing to do treatments, chemical treatments next year, but we're going to keep this as part of our arsenal in controlling this and slowing the movement. I said, we've also, by being out there every day and doing this, one of the interesting discoveries that they've made, now this may be something local, but they found after a heavy rainfall, like an overnight rainfall early morning, if you just wait a few hours and go in, for some reason, right after the rain, huge numbers of spotted lanternflies start congregating around the bottom of the tree trunks. And it's easy just to go right through the vacuums again and get them off. Let's see here. Again, you can see here you can see them in excuse me, in the canister, how they build up. And just the vacuums will pick up some leaves and some debris, but that just helps in effectively immobilizing, stunning, and eventually killing the spotted lanternfly as it's swirling around with the centrifugal force and the turbulence in the canister. So, I mean, it started out, we were wondering if it would work. Alone, it's not going to do anything on its own, but a combination of using the vacuums, scraping the egg masses, I do feel, and whether we can prove it scientifically hasn't been brought up yet, but from what our observations and our field inspectors, great team of people out there, what they've been doing and what they've noticed, it has an effect. We've noticed benefits from it. We've noticed decreases in the population where we would have expected more. So again, this is not going to be the answer to the problem, but it's not only a tool that just we can use. The more the public sees it, we can get the public more involved in this rather than just stomp the spotted lanternfly, add this to that whole activity of slowing it down and letting the public know we need their help to do it. This is not something that we could do alone. So with that, I said, don't want to take you up too much time. I know we're kind of running over. So I will just leave it at that. If there's any questions or anything that I could help now, I also will be on for the rest of the day if there's anything that comes up later that you wanted to ask. But once again, it's a good tool. And again, thanks for having us give this presentation, showing you what we're doing. Again, along with the rest of the states, hopefully we'll all be able to come back with better news next year. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. Yeah, there were quite a few questions coming in. Looked like maybe even some comments from some of your staffers out there in New York about these being used out in the field. But a lot of questions about the specs on the equipment and I think battery life and noise and things like that. But I have to say I probably agree that anytime there's a spectacle made, it's going to be a good awareness and an outreach tool as well. So if you can actually get some good work done with that spectacle, assuming these are pretty loud, it's going to put us ahead. So very cool, Frank. Thank you so much. Moving on next, we have Kenton Sumpter from the Maryland Department of Agriculture to talk about some of their management efforts in and around vineyards. Kenton or Jan, ready to go?
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yep. And it looks like your sharing is loading and you're up and live. So take it away.
All right, I'm just waiting for the slideshow to kind of start up here. Okay, good deal. So I've been asked to go and share just some very specific kind of vineyard related operations that Maryland has been getting into. We've decided to kind of focus on this as our primary place to make our impact against spotted lanternfly. And we've got kind of a little system figured out that's been fairly effective at getting assistance to our vineyards. They are getting hammered pretty heavily, at least last year they were in the eastern part of the state. And we're trying to go and get ahead of that over the winter season here and hopefully have some more aid to go and render them than when the lanternfly hatch out later on in spring. So initial contact for vineyards is based upon some pretty basic factors, but essentially the presence of spotted lanternfly and their proximity to historic infestations. Basically, the closer a vineyard is to a heavy infestation, it's going to be something that will kind of reach out to them first to go and see if we can help them out. Visual surveys are the primary means by which we identify if lanternfly are going to be present in the area. The capabilities of the vineyard when it comes to what they're actually able to go and provide. What we want to go and try and do with these guys is actually set up a management system for them that they can actually look after themselves and educate them on what their options are and what can be effective against lanternfly, rather than simply just being pest control for vineyards, you know, for the foreseeable future. So in determining the capabilities of a vineyard, we want to try and supplement those that don't have the ability to go and care for themselves and suss out if those that do can actually take over kind of a management role. So that certainly determines whether or not someone would actually go and directly receive treatment. But it is our goal to go and provide assistance to anyone that needs it. And then the big one is going to be if the vineyards actually go and call us back. Sometimes they are cagey about whether or not they even want assistance. So ultimately, if somebody wants to go and get a hold of us, they got to reach out to us or call us back after we reach out to them. So that's kind of the bottom line. But the goal is to visit everyone, and we're trying to make this a process that's available to every vineyard in the state. So we begin with our process by just establishing visual surveys. What we're trying to go and do is the typical finding host and spotted lanternfly. And if we do find spotted lanternfly, then we will assign a treatment release form for that vineyard. That's just our legally binding document that gives us right to, or the permission rather, to go and enter the property and perform treatments that the property owners agree to, which can be mechanical treatments or chemical, and they'll go and indicate that for us. So it'll kind of limit what exactly we're going to go and do. But pretty much as soon as we can go and schedule a treatment for the vineyard property, we will. We do set up a 1/4 mile buffer around the vineyard, but we don't want to wait on surveying every single buffer property to go and actually begin work on the vineyard. So in that case, we'll just go and start as soon as they give us permission, and we can schedule a day to go in there and do it. But we do go and try and extend out a little bit. The idea here is to create a beaten zone around a vineyard to try and push back the lanternfly from them. So as time allows, we will try and make contact with and survey every single property within a 1/4 mile. Still looking for host, looking for spotted lanternfly, and leaving behind informational documents if we can't get a hold of people, and trying to get residents to sign treatment release forms if we do determine that their property needs treatment. When it comes to actually trying to give people a heads up when we're going out, we mail people letters. We don't have phone numbers or emails for residents, so we'll just go ahead and send a series of 3 letters kind of updating them about the escalating or approaching survey period. In locations that are within our quarantine zone, we can go ahead and enter the property and survey after a certain time. Usually we give it 3 letters. That kind of constitutes about roughly 3 weeks-ish of notifications. But we'll go ahead and head on and then do that. We don't treat without permission, though. We definitely won't go and push it at this point. And if people don't want treatment, we will not just we'll go and go with their wishes when it comes to that. So we do collect treatment release forms from each property. If they don't go and get one back to us, we will try and send one to them and make sure that they actually can get it to us. We're trying to make this process a little easier because we've had a lot of issues with treatment release forms not being able to come back to us. We don't know exactly what is happening. People will swear that they've sent them to us, and then it just seems like they kind of get lost in the ether. So we're trying to make it easy and readable. We've reduced our release forms down to a single page. We include return envelopes, and it seems like from making this process easier that we're getting better participation, which is great. Because definitely the big limitation in doing these treatments is having some kind of continuous treatment area, and having big holes in it where you've got lanternfly reservoirs is less helpful. We don't want to leave stuff behind because people didn't go and mail us the proper paperwork. So as easy as we can make it, people can get these things back to us and we can get them scheduled for treatment. And this usually is more of an issue with residents that aren't quite so in the know about lanternfly or less concerned. Although working with the vineyards and their neighbors is typically easier than more remote locations or business locations that just don't have as much concern about lanternfly. Typically vineyards and their neighbors are very alert to it and are very responsive to kind of any aid that can be provided. So we do start working through our buffer properties when time allows, and we get those treatment release forms put together. We do schedule all of these, and our priority in this simple instance is to try and get adjacent properties taken care of first in terms of surveys and in terms of scheduling treatment releases. I don't know exactly what rate we're having for treatment release participation, but my memory says it's between like 50 to 80% of properties that we survey will go and get back to us, and we'll try and get those taken care of as soon as we can. The only real treatment scheme that we have so far for vineyards this year has been to do egg mass treatments. We were beginning a little bit with chemicals last year, but once that wrapped up, that kind of fell into the larger treatment regimen that we had going on. But this more refocused effort that we're making has really begun this winter. So egg masses have been the name of the game here, and we'll move on to chemical treatments later on as we keep going. While we're there, we look for everything, especially with egg masses. It makes it easy because we don't have to worry about spraying a structure or something, which we really don't want to go and do. So when we're there, we'll already have stuff kind of pre-surveyed. We know where we're going, but it behooves us to go ahead and double check everything that's there, all vines, structures, and vegetation that we can find. When it comes time to shift over to doing things like chemical treatments, we are going to be more constrained. That's going to be more limited to ornamental trees, tree of heaven, and like fence rows that we can actually get to. We're not going to be spraying anybody's grapes, no foods getting sprayed, nothing like that. We're going to go and stay away from things like that. So we're going to be a little bit more constrained when it comes to that kind of treatment scheme. But we are willing to work with vineyard owners, kind of fit in their treatments alongside ours to try and push lanternfly back in a concerted way. And we've got some little tools that we found to go and use. I know, I think it was New Jersey that was talking about using paint rollers for crushing egg masses and extendable poles, and I can support that too. It's a really outstanding tool to go and use when you don't have anything else to get up there and really crush stuff. And yeah, this just kind of showing off some of the implications. Obviously, we're not squishing eggs on the tops of nice buildings, but if we did see them, we might go after them. We've also made use of extendable mirrors for surveying underneath of vines. So if any states are curious about getting into the vineyard game a little bit more extensively, it's nice not to have to bend over to every single vine to go and look at it, and instead just take a little extendable inspection mirror and run it under the base of it. And can actually be kind of beneficial for fence rows and H-posts in a vineyard too. So you can just kind of save yourself some time, bending over and looking at them and working on your knees and that kind of stuff. And then the scrapers that we use, we don't have quite that nifty little dog leg device that was shown, but we're just using a very small, basic, whatever, squared off scraper there without the roller attached. And it's great, as opposed to using a flatter scraper. The roller really gives you a better angle at getting after these egg masses. And excuse me, the kind of the scope that we're working with right now, we're in contact with 86 kind of winery vineyards. So they actually have the business on site and they're selling wine in those locations. The kind of task that lays before us is just try and start getting a picture of the grape growers in Maryland. People that have vines on their properties, but that aren't running any kind of really obvious, business open to the public. They're growing grapes and selling them to wineries that are making wine out of them. And that's going to be something that we have to investigate a little bit more. They're a little bit harder to find, but we're certainly up to the task. So we're going to keep on working at it. But yeah, it's nothing crazy that we're doing here. It's mostly a matter of just being in contact with the vineyard owners, providing good outreach to them, being prompt in our services that we're rendering, and being thorough when we get there to go and do our treatments. And that's what we're going to keep on doing for the time being here. And nice and snappy. So that's it for me. If anyone has any questions, I can go ahead and take them, because I'm sure I got just a little bit of time. Otherwise, I can hop on off.
Thank you, Ken. I don't, I don't see anything specific to Maryland vineyards or anything along those lines. If you're going to be able to hang around for a little while in case anything else does come up.
Actually, I do have to hop off, but
Okay.
no, that's fine. If anyone has to get a hold of me, just shoot us an email over at our Don't Bug, and we'll get back to you.
Sounds good. Thanks. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I really
Take care,
appreciate
you
it.
bet. Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. So next up, we have Jacob Henry with the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture to discuss some timing applications for maximum impact. I think he's got some good experience and good information on this. So Jacob, are you ready?
I sure am. Can you hear me?
All right. Yes, sir.
All right.
And we see your screen up here. You're good to go.
Perfect. All right. So my name is Jacob Henry. I am the SLF Operations Manager with the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. I am here today to talk to you about the timing of spotted lanternfly treatments to maximize their effects. So I first want to start off with a little bit of the history of spotted lanternfly treatments in Pennsylvania. So I first came into the program in 2019, and at that point in time, we were doing primarily Ailanthus removal with some insecticide trap trees via hack and squirt insecticides with handheld equipments. We eventually moved on from that to do primarily insecticide with some systemic insecticide using primarily basal applications with backpacks. But following that, we really started to find an excellent place in our arsenal for contact insecticides, especially as it was applied through power equipment that allowed us to really reach up into the tops of the trees. We did that at the end of one season and started to see great results. In the following season, we ended up trying to do multiple treatments in combination with our systemic treatments, and we were really impressed by the results. So what does the future of spotted lanternfly treatments look like in Pennsylvania? It looks like multiple specifically timed contact treatments in combination with systemic insecticides. We've seen several properties across the state that have evidence of efficacy across them that have heavily reduced populations of spotted lanternfly across multiple seasons and even in single seasons with heavy use of power equipment. And when I say that, I'm talking like seeing hundreds of spotted lanternfly one year, following it up with treatments in the following year, and we were struggling to find single-digit numbers of spotted lanternfly on that property at the end of this season. So we worked with the members of that team to find out really specifically what they did, and we've come across a couple of common denominators here. So the treatment timing really lines up with a couple of things to be most effective. So any combination of these three, generally starting around 50% egg hatch, starting with that, you'll be most able to effectively reduce your overall population size within a season. Spotted lanternfly, while it is easy for them to, jump off a branch and hop over to another tree, generally they're going to be much more grouped up right around when they're hatching, especially when they're still in that first instar stage. And, they begin to spread out as they group out across those instars. But then you can still hit them really hard as they're emerging into adults before they get that high density dispersal that we saw being talked about yesterday. So you can really hit them really hard twice before they're turning into adults to really significantly reduce population sizes. And then a final sort of way to really get at them very well is to do some high intensity spraying right around the time of egg laying. Because then the more often that you're hitting them, especially if you're hitting them around egg laying, that just means the less egg masses that you're going to have laid in the next season. So in combination with the specific timing of these treatments, it's also important to consider where the spotted lanternfly are at these different times of the season. So we generally try to target specific vegetation You know, we have a list of 100 some odd species that we found spotted lanternfly on, but the ones listed here right now are the ones that we find them on the most commonly in the individual stages here. So when nymphs are hatching, obviously we're going to find them on Atlantis. That's the most common place to find spotted lanternfly. We're going to find them on our soft maple species, which are going to be your red and your silver maples. We've found that they have a really weird habit of laying a ton of egg masses on black cherry. Don't really know why, but especially when they're laying eggs or hatching out as nymphs, you're going to want to look for some black cherry and spray those down with your contact insecticides. And then your black walnut, especially when they're younger, before they turn fully into adults, as they were talking about yesterday. When they are emerging into adults, again, you're going to be looking for your Atlantis. But really, we found that as they're merging into adults, that late fourth instar molting into adult stage is when you're really going to find them concentrated on your vines. So we've seen them a lot on porcelain berry, Virginia creeper, bittersweet, both the American and Oriental bittersweets, poison ivy, and wild grapevines. We've also find them on multiflora rose, again, your soft maple, and again, your black walnut. And then once we get to the egg laying season, so we've gone past all of the full adult stage, we're hitting late October, early November, when we're really starting to hit that egg laying season. Again, we're going to be looking for Atlantis, soft maple, black walnut, black cherry, and non-vegetative vertical structures if your chemical that you're treating with allows for applications on those substrates. You know, for us using the bifenthrin that we use, we can only treat the bottom 3 feet, but we do see, you know, we can see up to 10 days of efficacy of residual kill. So we can just treat the bases of those structures. And as they try to climb up, as long as they're not jumping directly onto them, we can still get a pretty effective kill. You know, right now we're seeing really great results with this methodology. We're planning to expand this across the state to the majority of our high priority properties for this season. But we are planning to back this up with some statistics this season to confirm that our results really are showing what we think they're showing. So pretty short presentation, pretty simple, but I'm also going to be here. So I'm going to be available for questions, especially regarding treatment methodology here.
Thanks, Jacob. Appreciate it. There was a question or comment in the chat. I think you probably addressed some of it. But actually, I guess at this point we can open it up to discussion since we have time. Let me kick it over to Dana right now that all the presentations are done. If you have any final thoughts or transition comments, Dana, I'll open it up to you quick.
No, I think, you know, there's really a lot of good information here that I'm hoping states can take away. Those of you that haven't found it, you know, what Michigan and North Carolina shared about being prepared. I hope that that was helpful information that you got there, and then just different perspectives of how different states have been approaching some of these things, you know, dealing with the fact that you cannot always use pesticides. You know, the vacuum cleaners certainly out of the box. I will be talking to Jake about that. And we do have some areas where that might be something that would be very useful to some of our folks. So it is good. I noticed that there has been a lot of discussion about tree of heaven and removal of tree of heaven. And, you know, what about the populations? I think the one thing that Penn State has been able to show us so far through the research they've been able to do and some of the other things is we're still not sure about total removal of tree of heaven. Can it help in areas that don't have it? Possibly, but still remember they can survive without it. Are they as strong? No, but you will still have numbers. But the one thing you know is that if there is tree of heaven there, they will go to it. So please be cautious as you are thinking about tree of heaven removal. It's also very expensive to remove a tree. So that is the highest cost of any management, is when you start removing trees. So that would just be something I would caution you on. So, but otherwise, I think let's open it up for discussion and see if there's anything else people have.
I will second that, but first I want to send out a thank you to everybody that participated today, presented. Everything was very interesting as always. I think, you know, if this does continue in the future and we do add more and more states as expected, we may have to dedicate an entire day to state reports, because there's just a lot of information in there. But kudos to everybody. Everything was super, super interesting, super well done. Thank you to Dana, of course, and all of her staff, and all the folks again behind the scenes, Brian, Jacob, Eric, all of our moderators as well. You know, those are the folks that kind of made this go so seamlessly. You know, when you talk about a baseball game, here I go with my analogies again, but baseball games are good when you don't notice the umpires, right? And I think these kinds of things are good when nothing goes wrong and nobody has to interject. So you make it real easy on us as the moderators to to keep things going. So I want to thank everybody for doing this. And this is always one of the highlights of my year, to participate in this and be able to help out with this. So I thank everybody and all of their efforts. And with that, I will go ahead and open it up to some discussion. And if there's a lull in anything, I have a couple of topics that I may break the ice with. So let's see what comes in.
Okay, I see Jules Griffin is putting out about a children's program. Jules, there's already stuff that I know has been created. Penn State, their extension offices have put together some really nice outreach for programs that are geared for different ages. So I would definitely reach out to them. I'm going to brag a little bit about Lucky. We didn't get to hear about Lucky, our detector dog, but they have actually put together little buttons that you can become part of her team in fighting spotted lanternfly, and that's geared for 1st through 3rd graders. I know that 4-H also has a curriculum that's been developed, and that was probably done around 2016. In Pennsylvania, the Department of Education requires an invasive species week. And so a module was created for spotted lanternfly. So there is material out there. And I think extension would probably be the best place to try and start looking for those. Okay.
Well, Dana, I don't know if Rebecca Hutchings is still on, but she had a comment back at 3:07 that I kind of mentioned earlier and wanted to get back to. And I think it's an interesting idea and concept regarding having local governments list certified contractors for treating tree of heaven. She said she felt like homeowners would pay for controls if it was easier to find qualified contractors. Then she was actually talking about the herbicide to kill tree of heaven. And I think that's something that we've seen as somewhat of a challenge. You know, you have to be concerned about you know, the appearance of endorsement or supporting any particular individual or entity or even a treatment method. I think you know, we saw those challenges with emerald ash borer as well. I think the term that we try to promote, at least I do when I talk to folks about this, is like approved contractors. So somebody that within the community that you know, their economic development group or even their public works group has you know, quote unquote vetted to say, yeah, they're a legitimate company, they have insurance, they're bonded, they have their licenses and things along those lines in place. So But yeah, I agree. If there's kind of a one-stop shop, if you wanted to find out who had a certified a pesticide license here in Illinois, you'd have to go on our website. You have to search for it, and I think it's a lot easier on the local side of it if you do have your hometown or your municipality, your township, or whoever it may be, have a list of those. I'll use the term approved vendors again. So. Yeah,
It's
many
got,
certified arborists are not in this business. So yeah, it is kind of unique and niche. And unfortunately, like we saw with the EAB, people take advantage of that situation, and they may come across to something that they aren't, or may, we always use the term that if you had a pickup truck and a chainsaw, you automatically became a firewood dealer. So people may try to take advantage of these situations. So yeah, I do agree that there some level of policing, for lack of a better term, would be valuable, and I do agree with that.
well, and Scott, too, I hear what you're saying and agree. Pennsylvania has the same problem where we cannot promote any company over another, but
Yeah.
certainly anyone who applies pesticide commercially in Pennsylvania has to have a license. So that's the first question anybody should ask. Do you have a license? And you can certainly check with the state to make sure that they are. They should be able to show it to you upon request. If they hem and haw, then I'm not so sure that you would want to do that. Also, ask a lot of questions about them. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Consumer beware when it comes to these deals.
Mm-hmm. I see the comment and question from Brent again. Yeah, I remember seeing that one in the chat as well. I don't know, Jacob, is that something you maybe want to touch on with your experiences as far as treatments and leaving trap trees and how that, I know that's been something we've talked about in the past, but do you have any experience or considerations with that?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a multi-level question, right? So I think trap trees on their own, they're going to kill spotted lanternfly. They definitely work. Will they be as effective as combining it with other treatments? No. We have found that so far the most effective treatment is a combination of multiple contact sprays and the systemics. You're gonna, you can get in and do your sprays early in the season, between May and June, in that time when you're hitting your 50% hatch. But then there's a time when you're limited on your trap tree creation because of Atlantis flowering and the label of your dinotephuron products. So then setting that up after that flowering period, and doing those treatments at the same time, right there around the beginning of July when you're starting to see adults, well, at least in Pennsylvania, when we're starting to see adults, laying down another contact spray, putting in your systemic insecticides, and then you can just kind of fire and forget for the rest of the season, and you're going to know that your property is going to be killing spotted lanternfly while you're not there working in other places. And then you can come back in the end of the season and do your egg mass broadcast treatments at the end of the season. So there's a lot of messing around that you can do with that, but I definitely think they're a really valuable tool to have in your tool belt, especially when, if you're working with as many properties as some of these states are now, you're not going to be able to immediately come back to a lot of these places.
Jake, can you kind of elaborate too? Because another thing that we are planning to do with our contractors with regarding Atlantis is to treat, if we've got a property that has a couple of different patches of them, leave the ones that are easier to reach versus the others that might be on the back 40. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's kind of a classical forestry technique, really. You've got a big patch of property that you want to work on, and that you've got a big patch of something that you just flat out don't want to deal with way back in the boonies of the property. Then it's really in your best interest to go back in the back and just kill off what you don't want to deal with. And there is an advantage to getting rid of that Atlantis. We do know that they're less likely to survive based on a couple of those studies that we saw yesterday. We know they can continue their life cycle without them, but by keeping your most active treatments in the areas that are easiest to get to, you're going to reduce the overall time that you're going to be on any property at a given time. And when you're going back to a property 3 or 4 times in any given season, that really adds up over the course of a year.
Thanks, Jake.
Dana, Rebecca had a follow-up comment about and I can see where this would come into play as far as the tree of heaven niche and maybe not necessarily filling into a particular category. I mean, I can speak from Illinois' perspective on how we may address that if and when the time comes. But do you have any experience on that from Pennsylvania's, or is there anybody else on that can address how maybe that was handled? I know Joy mentioned the special local needs label considerations and things like that. So anything on the licensing side where I think Rebecca maybe said, yeah, most people aren't in the business of killing trees in that sense. So how has that been handled?
Well, it also, for Pennsylvania, it's the category that you fall into. So we have multiple categories. And, that helps us whether, the tree of heaven is in a landscape setting, the applicators are able to apply for that particular category. If it's in a forested area, there's another category for that. So that really expands where they can treat to remove tree of heaven. So it's considered, undesirable in those situations. It just also happens to take care of some spotted lanternfly issues for us as well, or to help. But each state is going to be different on what their pesticide requirements are and how they license. Rebecca, I know it's not easy. Unfortunately, there's not one answer for that all 50 states will be able to fall under.
Yeah, and if I can just echo that, in Illinois, we do have a forestry category, a right-of-way category, and an ornamental category. And as strange as it seems to consider this tree an ornamental, that would be the landscape, on private property or someone's yard. Whereas right-of-way would be obviously along the roadsides and things like that, and then forestry in the forested areas. So I think, with the flexibility that there is out there to interpret something like this in a potential emergency situation, I think there's ways to address it for sure.
Dana, I was just curious to follow up on that real quick. This is Craig.
Yep.
Was that, I don't know if it was a declaration or legislation that was passed declaring, tree of heaven as a, invasive or obnoxious weed, like soon after SLF? Did that help at all?
It certainly gives us more authority, Greg. It was declared a noxious weed. And I think that's the same for many other states, which turns out to be really good because, believe it or not, on Amazon, they sell tree of heaven seed, which they can no longer offer for sale in Pennsylvania. So, yep. All sorts of nuances.
It's always something, isn't it, Dana?
Always something. We lose sleep over so many things, Scott.
I know. Misery loves company, though.
Yeah.
Someone posted, Frank, if you're still around, I thought I saw you on. They were looking for a comment on your map that you showed with the red dots, particularly along the U.S.-Ontario border. Have there been more finds along the border beyond what was found in Buffalo?
No, it's just the find. It is in Buffalo, within the city of Buffalo. I can't remember the exact location, but it was right on a nature trail next to railroad tracks. So it wasn't right up on the border, but it is in Buffalo. Just in Buffalo, it hasn't spread further out yet, as far as we can tell.
Thank you.
And so, Mary, you asked about visiting a property 3 to 4 times in a treatment season. Please remember that all the states that you've heard from today use a priority. We rank all the properties, so it's going to be dependent on the priority of the property. and the type of treatment that you're doing. So yes, you could be visiting properties multiple times, but again, population, priority, there are many factors that determine that.
Our highest priority properties saw at least 3 visits last year.
Now, Kent is no longer on, so I'm not sure if vacuuming in vineyards, he would know. Frank, do you think that this is something that New York might consider?
So I would have to check in with Chris and Ethan about that.
Understood. Understood. We all have bosses we answer to, Frank. I got it.
Yep.
Although I will comment that it does sound like an interesting idea, just simply because of the height of the plants. I mean, that seems way more conducive to going into a forested setting. So interesting concept, anonymous attendee. Oh, cool.
All right. So we did get an answer that yes, they're thinking about using the vacuums in the vineyard. So
Right.
Again, we all get great ideas from just listening to each other and what you're doing. So this is why we want to keep the summit going for everybody. So please remember that you will have a survey. If you have not taken the survey, please do so. If you took it yesterday, guess what? You don't have to do it again. So once is enough. So.
Hey, Dana, I think we still have a little bit of time, and I don't know if anybody wants to hang around a little longer, but one thing that I wanted to bring up, and I noticed Joy isn't on, I don't believe, but she was driving back from being out in the field, and I think I made a comment on her last slide where she showed that kind of all-encompassing time frame. And one of the things she mentioned showed up in the upper right-hand corner was all the tourism components of it. And one of the things here in Illinois, though we don't have the vineyards and the grape industry as some of the other states do. And it was interesting to see the cucumber information, probably relative or relatable to pumpkins. And, I don't know, the horseradish thing was just thrown out there. But one of the things that, my administration has been asking about is the agritourism side of it. And we've put in some legislation to promote and facilitate agritourism operations throughout the state. And something that I've been thinking about quite a bit is, aside from obviously like pumpkin patches and things like that, what about orchards and, apple picking and things along those lines. And obviously we hear about going to a vineyard and sitting down and enjoying a glass of wine, and the implications of thousands and millions of spotted lanternfly flying around. But long story short, I guess what I'm getting at is what is everybody hearing? What are their thoughts or concerns about that agritourism component of people maybe not wanting to go out and pick fruit that has honeydew on it or spotted lanternfly all over it? Any experience with that anywhere?
Well, I can tell you that it is a turnoff for people who like to sit out and do their wine tastings outside at the vineyard. Because I actually had a legislator who sent me a nice picture of the spotted lanternfly that was floating on top of her wine. So it's not very pleasant, or they're landing on you. So, or if you're trying to take a nice walk through the forested area and you've got a lot of spotted lanternfly, you've got honeydew raining down on you. Our teams can tell you, hats are essential. You've got to have them, otherwise you are a stickier mess than you want to be when you come out. And Scott, I think about, it's not just the vineyards. We have in Pennsylvania, we've got the ice cream trail, we've got the wine trail. So, the microbrewery trail. So again, we try and work with all of these industries to help them find a friendly message that doesn't scare their clients, but says, hey, before you leave here, make sure you look. Don't take it with you to some other place. So yeah, we find better ways to help. I know that they put out some coloring sheets, I think, for some of the pumpkin rides and the hay rides and the places where kids are going, the apple picking in the fall. So it is something that is very important. Oh, and I see somebody put in about wedding venues. It's not just, again, at vineyards. That can be your church, your local community church. We've had stories where they're having to vacuum constantly so that the bride is not squashing spotted lanternfly as she's trying to walk down the aisle. So yes, it can be impactful when there are large populations in an area.
If I could just kind of jump in on that real quick, that's another one of those partnership opportunities. We've put a lot of outreach material in vineyards and the wineries and such, so that their visitors get information about spotted lanternfly and know how to report it, how to recognize it, that sort of thing. But, looking out, considering some of the limitations that we have and other states might be dealing with in terms of funding and such. I think some of those specialty agriculture situations are going to be areas where we might have to move them up the priority list that Dana was talking about quite a bit, and make those the sort of customers that we really have to focus on serving in order to maintain kind of commerce within our states.
And Jonathan, that's a good point. Another approach is to work with your county conservation districts. That's one thing that we do in Pennsylvania. The closer you can get to your local communities, the better they are to really assist the people in the community, because they know what those priorities are, and they can find the messaging that will help the people in those local areas know what they should be doing and how they can be helpful. So it really, really is important. The more local you can make this, the better buy-in everyone will have. And there are so many partners out there that really want to help us all. We are not alone. We just have to make those connections and make that network happen. Okay, we cannot end on a really sad note of weddings being rained on. So
Yeah, and sister-in-law's covered in SLF.
I know. Let's
No, we
not
need
do
something.
that. It's been too good for us to end on a downer, guys.
Well, to add on that, even in cities, they have either storefronts or cafes with bistro seating. And I think that is a form of economic impact that isn't being assessed. And so there may be other resources that can be other potential partners that can be recruited when we look at that form of impact.
Absolutely, Jacob. I think that we need to reach out to some of those partners that can help us. It's a matter of how many staff do we have that can do that in those moments. So we've got to find a better way. And maybe this group that's being planned through the strategic alliance, the strategic plan, maybe that's one avenue that they can help us with. But on the positive side, when they are in urban areas, I do know that many of the businesses start having local competitions on which business stomped more spotted lanternfly. Or when you're in senior communities, they keep tallies of who's out there swatting more spotted lanternfly than the other. So it can become kind of competitive to the detriment of spotted lanternfly, but certainly to the betterment of those who are living in those areas.
Dana, this is Julie. Could
Sure,
I
Julie.
add something about the partnership? But before I do, I saw Jacob Ricker's note, instead of rice being thrown at weddings, what about lanternfly? Hey, if people do that, I'll renew my vow. I'll bring a vat of ethanol and clean up. Okay. Anyway, but I think what was really neat about this summit, but especially this iteration this year, are all the really good conversations that have come up. And so I think the partnerships in this group, particularly as a researcher, like getting to listen to the experiences of the states today. And it's just, I've jotted so many notes, and the idea that we're working across traditional silos. And I feel like I've been fed a lot in terms of ideas and listening to other states, to other researchers, and to everyone who shared at this workshop. So I think that partnership is really the name of the game, and this summit does a lot to fuel that. And so I wanted to thank everyone who participated and Dana and all of you who organized it. Thank you.
Julie, thank you so much. I totally agree. I think this summit to me has really been very meaningful. I feel like we have heard some new folks, some new ideas, and I hope that we're going to take those and kind of mentor those who are having some of those new ideas. Because as older fogies here that have been around a while, we know what the hurdles are going to be. So maybe we can help them through some of those. But it's good to have new ideas, get new perspectives. And just hearing all the research that's going on and everything. And Julie, when you get excited about something, I truly, truly get excited. So it's just been a wonderful experience for me, and I hope everybody has enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dana. Very cool.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Any other comments, questions? Well, again, to the team, you have all been phenomenal. The speakers, just really, really good information. I feel like we've made some really good connections this year. And I do appreciate, I like the format. I hope that folks did as well, where we had these moments where we would come together and have these panel discussions. Please give that feedback on the surveys because we want to make this better each and every year. So thank you all very much. And I hope you have a nice evening. And I hope that spotted lanternfly is a long way away from you. And for those of you that have it, I hope it is an outstanding year in knocking them down. We certainly are going to do our best here in Pennsylvania. I know the team is just really ready to go and excited to get working. So take care, everyone.